starting the spoilers from the original Spider-Man. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201. On the road, two cars, one white and one black, drove past at high speed. Tony drove to the private airport, followed by Happy, and Rod had been waiting for him here for a long time. "You are awesome. I thought I had gotten rid of you." Tony praised Happy. "There was a period, sir. I encountered a red light." Happy went to the trunk and took out Tony's luggage. "What's wrong with you?" Rod asked Tony unhappily. "What?" Tony pretended to be stupid. "You are late. Please. What can I do in the face of natural disasters and man-made disasters?" Tony said nonchalantly and walked onto the private plane. 3 whole hours. "You made me wait here for 3 hours. Rod complained. "Let's go. Come on. Take off. Let's have fun." Tony walked in without looking back, and Rod reluctantly took off his hat and followed behind. On the plane, the beautiful stewardess set the tableau for Tony. Tony's eyes never left her. Rod sat opposite him and read the newspaper intently. "What are you reading, man?" Tony asked curiously. "Nothing." Rod didn't want to pay attention to Tony and said without turning his head, "Come on, don't be angry. Anger hurts your body." Tony knew Rod was angry with him. But how could Rod admit it? So he denied it. "I'm not angry. It doesn't matter, okay? I apologize to you. I apologize to you." As they spoke, 2 stewardesses brought them wet towels. "I'm really not angry. You don't respect yourself, so of course you won't respect me. Do you know? I'm just your babysitter. If you want to change diapers, if you want to drink milk, please tell me, okay?" Rod said unceremoniously. Tony didn't get angry after hearing that, but shouted to the stewardess, "Hey, a glass of hot steak. How about you?" "Thanks for reminding me. No, I didn't say I wanted to drink. We can't drink now. We have to work." Although Rhodes wanted to drink, he couldn't show it too obviously. But Tony didn't care so much. "You must drink sake when eating sashimi. You are a person who is born irresponsible. Not drinking is irresponsible. It's just a nightcap." Tony waved his hand and said. The stewardess brought the bottle and asked, "Hot sake?" Tony nodded. "Yes. 2 glasses, please." "No, I absolutely don't drink." Rhodes refused righteously in the last second. The next second, Tony and Rhodes were already sitting in the bar on the plane with glasses in their hands, watching the beauties dancing. Rod leaned against Tony with a bottle of wine, and the two of them started to brag about each other under the influence of alcohol. "Ha ha 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 ha. Rod, don't you not drink?" Tony grinned at Rod. If it weren't for Cheyenne Moo's reminder, he would have forgotten this part. "Damn it. I said I can't drink." Rod covered his face and lowered his head. Now it's his turn to be socially dead. The little spider looked at this scene curiously. He still couldn't understand why Tony wanted to hug that woman and why he watched those women dance. "I didn't expect that the liaison officer who looked serious on the surface would also play so much in private." Garfield Spider smacked his lips. "This can't be considered too much. It's just watching beautiful women dancing. It's inevitable for men." Harry didn't care. In his opinion, only Tony could be called playful. Garfield Spider nodded thoughtfully. He didn't understand what the upper class was without contact. More citizens envied Tony's life, full of bright lights, beautiful women, and different lives every day. Afghanistan, Bagra Air Force Base. As the plane landed, Tony also walked out of it. There was already a group of soldiers waiting for him under the plane. "General." Tony smiled and shook hands with him. "Welcome, Mr. Stark. We are looking forward to your weapons display." After a few simple greetings, Tony immediately prepared to display it. He stood in the middle facing everyone. Terrible or respectable? I wonder if it is possible to have both. Now, I want to introduce you to the best of Stark's Freedom Weapon series. It is the first missile system equipped with our exclusive propulsion technology. Some people say that the best weapon is the one that never needs to be used. I have reservations opinion. I prefer it. Only need to use such a weapon once. This is the experience of my father. It is also the experience of the United States. This experience has been proven by history. Find an opportunity to try this weapon. I can assure you, those bad guys will never want to get out of the hole again. Tony waved his hand after saying that. The launcher standing aside immediately started working, and the soldiers on the scene cast their eyes over. It aimed at the target that had been preset long ago, and then launched one of the missiles with a bang. The missile split into dozens of sub-bodies in the air and scattered towards the target location. I solemnly recommend it to everyone. Jericho missile. Tony turned his back to the missile's landing point and could clearly see the missile landing. As he spread his hands, a violent explosion sounded behind him, the range and power of which far exceeded the imagination of everyone present. The strong shock wave hit, blowing the general and Rhodes hats away in an instant, and Tony was also blown forward by the strong wind. Tony opened a box he brought, which contained several bottles of high-end wine and corresponding wine utensils. He picked up a glass and said, "A purchase of more than $500 million US. Free wine. 4-piece. Then he took a sip. Wow. Toby Spider stood up in shock. The power of this weapon is too terrible. The key is that Tony Stark keeps talking about peace. The first generation Gwen also stared blankly. At the same time, people all over the world were also extremely shocked by this terrible power. But the most shocked are the countries in the world. This kind of missile that only needs one to cover a large area, has its own navigation, and has a large number of sub-bodies that are difficult to intercept, is really too terrifying. Is this the Jericho missile? Damn warmonger, damn Tony Stark." Wanda looked at the appearance of Tony showing the weapon in the sky, and she could not forget that her parents also died on the missile made by Stark Industries. Even if the sky said that Tony sacrificed himself to save the entire universe, Wanda could not forget the disaster he brought to her family. Chapter 202. Tony opened his phone while drinking. His phone was still on a small screen at this time. The person on the video call with him was Abadi Atstani. "Abi, why haven't you slept yet?" Tony asked. Abadi lay on the bed with his upper body naked. "I can't sleep because I don't know the result." "How is it?" Tony replied. "Everything went well. It seems that we will make a lot of money this time." Hearing Tony's reply, Abadia was very satisfied. "Hey, good job, kid. See you tomorrow." "Okay. Why don't you wear the pajamas I bought for you?" At this time, Tony didn't know that Abadia wanted him to not see the sun tomorrow. He got on the military Hummer and hung up the phone. Rod came over and wanted to get in the car together, but was rejected by Tony. "I'm sorry. This is a happy Hummer. The one behind is an angry Hummer. See you at the base." Rejected. Rod had to go to the last car, which also made him lucky to survive the attack. Then came the scene at the beginning. Tony was ambushed while sitting in a military Hummer. In a trance, he saw himself being treated. The doctor took away most of the shrapnel from his body, and a doctor placed a strange device on his chest. Ethan. Tony closed his eyes silently, recalling the days in the cave. It was a pity that he failed to rescue Ethan, who was Tony's real savior. Seeing that Tony was in a bad mood, everyone did not disturb him and watched silently. "You deserve it." Seeing Tony seriously injured, Wanda said with relief, and Quicksilver Pietro beside her also nodded. As one of the culprits who killed their parents, the siblings both hated Tony very much, so they felt very relieved to see him injured. "What is that? A magnet?" Toby Spider was a little unsure, so he turned his head and looked at the first generation Gwen. The first generation Gwen looked at it carefully and nodded and said, "Yes, it looks like a magnet. I wonder what it is used for. Maybe it is used to threaten him? Install a bomb or something on him so that he won't run away." Uncle Ben guessed. "No, this doesn't make sense." Toby Spider shook his head. Tony was obviously seriously injured. It was impossible for him to escape. It was not even certain whether he could survive. And if it was a bomb, it should not look like a magnet. Toby Spider had seen bombs before and knew that bombs would not look like this. That thing looked more like it had other uses. Tony finally woke up after being unconscious for a long time. He found that there was still a tube in his nose, and he quickly pulled out the extremely long thin tube. Then he struggled to get a cup to drink water, but knocked the cup over. At this time, he realized that there was another person here. He saw Ethan shaving himself in front of the mirror. Tony saw that he ignored him, so he turned around to get the kettle, but accidentally pulled the battery on the other side. Ethan said lightly, "If it were me, I wouldn't bother." Tony turned around and found that there was a wire from a car battery connected to his chest. He pulled it lightly and felt a pain. He quickly patted his chest and noticed the existence of an object. He tore off the bandage and found that there was a strange thing embedded in his chest. The battery wire was connected to it. Tony took 2 deep breaths and was a little unbelievable. Ethan whistled while cooking. Tony sat on the bed and looked at the device on his chest with a mirror and asked, "What did you do to me? What did you do?" "Humph. I saved your life. I tried my best to remove all the shrapnel, but the rest will still enter your heart valve. Here, do you want to see it? My souvenir. Take a look." Ethan picked up a small glass bottle and shook it, throwing it to Tony. He picked it up and looked at it and found 3 or 4 tiny shrapnel in it. Many people in our village have suffered this kind of injury. They are called the living dead, because after about a week, the shrapnel will enter their hearts. "What is this?" Tony asked, glancing at the device on his chest. "That's a magnet. Powered by a car battery, it can absorb shrapnel and prevent them from entering the heart." Ethan explained the function of this thing to him. Tony zipped up his clothes after hearing this, and then noticed the camera in the corner. Following his gaze, Ethan also saw the surveillance camera point. He smiled and said, "That's right. Smile. We've met at a technical conference in Bern. I don't remember." Tony turned his head and looked at the situation in the cave. Ethan knew Tony's character and smiled slightly. "Of course you don't remember. If I were as drunk as you, I wouldn't even be able to stand up. Not to mention giving an integrated circuit class." What Tony didn't know was that Aldrich Killian was also stood up by him at this meeting. "Where is this?" As soon as Tony finished speaking, there was a movement outside the iron gate. Ethan immediately whispered to Tony nervously, "Stand up. Stand up." Then he pulled him up and told him, "Do as I do. Quick, put your hands up." Tony raised his hands with Ethan, looking puzzled. He saw several people coming in from outside the door, and Tony saw the guns in their hands at a glance. "That's my gun. How come they have it?" Tony was puzzled. Stark Company only trades with the military. Where do these gangsters get their weapons? Hearing Tony still mumbling, Ethan panicked and said, "Don't you understand me? Do as I do." The man said to Tony in Arabic, "Welcome, Tony Stark. You are the most famous, the worst murderer ever." Through the sky curtain, everyone could understand what he was saying. But Tony Stark in the sky curtain didn't understand, so Ethan translated it for him attentively. "It's my honor to meet you. Please help me make missiles. Jericho missiles. Mass killing. Show him, let him understand." The leader handed the photo in his hand to Ethan, and Ethan showed it to Tony. Tony understood what the other party wanted the Jericho missile to do, so he said, "I won't do it." The next second, Tony was pushed into the water by the head. Tony struggled frantically, but to no avail. After choking on water several times in a row, the other party grabbed him to a place. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203. This is too bad, Tony Stark. The first generation Harry smacked his lips while holding the wine glass. It was obvious that Tony was no longer in control. If he didn't agree, he might lose his life. Of course, if he insisted on not doing it, the kidnappers might also choose to let his family pay a high ransom. As for whether he could return home safely after paying the money, that was another matter. Mary Jane, sitting aside, also felt that Tony Stark was in trouble this time. It would be very difficult for him to go back. The first generation Harry judged others by himself. If he was caught, he would have to agree first, and then look for opportunities, or wait for rescue. Tony was led out of the cave with his head covered. The leader waved his hand to let people take off the hood. The sudden dazzling sunlight made him unable to open his eyes for a while. When he got used to it, he found that he was in a valley. Seeing Tony standing still, the Ten Commandments members behind him pushed him hard, causing him to stagger. Tony had no choice but to walk down with the car battery. He looked around and saw a lot of stark weapons that shouldn't be here. The leader deliberately revealed all this to him and then asked Tony what he thought. Tony was surprised that they had so many weapons of their own. The leader explained that this was obtained from his American friend and told Tony that there were a lot of materials here to make Jericho missiles. Ethan translated it to Tony word by word and told him that Tony would be free after the matter was done. He was the knife and I was the fish. Tony had to cooperate with the other party in order to seek a chance to go home, so he shook hands with the other party to express his agreement. In the distance, the real leader touched the ring on his hand and looked at Tony from a distance. People have to bow their heads under the eaves. Tony, it's hard for you. You can actually find a way to escape. Hill said to Tony, who was silent. Huh. It's nothing. It's not difficult for me. You know, I'm a super genius. Tony took a deep breath, adjusted his mood, and smiled at her. So you used a hammer to knock out a small arc reactor? I really can't imagine what would happen if Dr. Otto saw it. Roadside. Dr. Otto has been studying technology for a lifetime, but has never succeeded. But Tony made it in the cave with simple tools. The second generation Harry, who has a keen sense of smell, felt that something was wrong. Those weapons should not have appeared there. The only explanation is that someone in the military or Stark Industries sold them here. There is only this one explanation, otherwise it doesn't make sense at all. Maybe Tony was even caught because someone betrayed his whereabouts. The biggest suspect is naturally the Abadiath Tony mentioned by the robbers when they took the video. Tony happened to talk to him on the phone, and the two were familiar with each other, so Tony would naturally not be on guard against him. He told Garfield, Spider and the others what he said, and they all agreed. At night, Tony sat by the fire, and Ethan walked past him. I believe the military is looking for you, but it's hard for them to find this place. He squatted down and looked at Tony. Look, what you just saw. All of them are your masterpieces. Your research results fell into the hands of those murderers. Are you really going to sit and wait for death? Don't you want to do something? This is the arrogant Tony Stark. Why should I do something? They will kill me and you instead. Even if they show mercy, I won't live long. Tony was a little depressed. So, these few days are crucial to you, right? Huh? Ethan looked at Tony. Tony suddenly had an idea. So the next morning. This is where I work. The light should be good and the equipment should be complete. I need welding equipment, a welding table, and a helmet. Protective goggles, crucibles. In addition, I need 2 precision instruments. Tony spoke very quickly. Ethan kept translating for him beside him, and a large number of gang members came to help Tony build the workshop he needed. The perspective gave a Stark Industries missile. A pair of hands were carefully dismantling it, and Tony asked Ethan while working, how many languages do you speak? A lot. But here, it's still not enough. They speak Arabic, Urdu, Dari, Pashto, Mongolian, Fars and Russian. Tony listened while his hands kept moving and soon disassembled the inner body of the missile. Who are they? Ethan smiled slightly when he heard this. They are all your loyal users. They call themselves freedom fighters. The small leader watched Tony's work through the surveillance camera, but he didn't notice anything unusual because he didn't understand it at all. Tony continued to be busy, and Ethan squatted down and said, if you let me participate in your plan, the efficiency may be higher. Really? Tony didn't comment and hammered off the head of the missile by himself and then pulled out the entire inside. Then after taking out what he wanted from it, he casually threw the entire component behind him. What is that? Ethan didn't quite understand why Tony went to so much trouble just to get that little thing. Tony picked it up with tweezers and explained. Metal palladium. 0.15 grams of metal palladium. We need at least 1.6 grams. So we have to dismantle all the missiles. What is he doing? Asked a kidnapper. Work. The person in charge of monitoring answered. Tony melted all the palladium metal obtained from dismantling the missile, and Ethan carefully clamped the can with metal lead. Be careful. We only have one chance. Tony watched nervously. Don't worry. My hands are steady. Otherwise, how could you survive to this day? Huh. Ethan smiled lightly and teased Tony. With Ethan's actions, a round palladium metal was made, and Tony asked Ethan's name for the first time. Then Tony placed the cooled palladium metal on a glass lens that had been made long ago, and then made something similar to a coil. Tony slowly turned the switch, and this simple miniature reactor lit up, emitting a blue-white light. Ethan walked over and looked at this thing. This doesn't look like a Jericho missile. That's because it's a miniaturized arc reactor. I have a large one at home that powers the factory. It should be enough to absorb the shrapnel. Tony explained to Ethan. Ethan asked curiously, how much electricity does it generate? If I'm not wrong, it should be 3 billion joules per second. Tony said as he looked at the miniature reactor. Enough for your heart to last for thousands of years. Ethan was a little surprised when he heard this. Tony said calmly, yeah. Large appliances can be powered for 15 minutes. Chapter 204. At first, Otto was very confused about what Tony needed so much palladium for. As an expert in nuclear physics, he also knew some basic structures of missiles. The kidnappers were almost uneducated and could not understand what Tony was doing, but Otto felt strange. He felt that Tony was not making a Jericho missile at all. No matter how complicated the structure of the Jericho missile was, it should not require so much palladium, and this shape did not look like what a missile needed. It was not until Tony told him the real purpose of this thing that Otto realized that it was similar to the artificial sun he had been studying. It's just that he used thermonuclear reactions, and Tony used cold nuclear reactions, but the principles are the same. Otto never thought that Tony Stark could make the great technology he dreamed of with just these simple materials and environment. At this moment, he felt that his decades of hard work were so ridiculous. The little sun he had been thinking about was made casually in Tony's hands. He stared at Tony with wide eyes. Before, Cheyenne Mu said that Tony was a genius inventor, but he didn't think anything of it. Now he realized that Cheyenne Mu saying that he was a genius was really an insult to him. If Tony was just a genius, then what was he? A foolish fool. The first generation Harry also thought of Otto's nuclear fusion research at the first time, and then called him and got confirmation from Otto. He also heard a little frustration in his tone. He told Toby Spider about this matter. It is estimated that only Toby Spider can cheer him up again. Tony put a pile of drawings on the table. This is the tool for our escape. Ethan took a look and saw only a pile of scattered parts. He couldn't see what it was and asked in confusion, "What is it? Look at it this way." Tony stacked the drawings layer by layer, and a miniature appeared on the drawings through the light. "Oh, wow. It's amazing," Ethan praised in a low voice. The gangsters have been monitoring Tony and his team. The reactor on Tony's chest is extremely conspicuous on the display screen, but these gangsters think it is just a magnet Tony uses to save his life. After being busy for a long time and completing the first step of the plan, Tony also relaxed a lot. He even had the leisure to play games with Ethan and asked him where he was from. "I come from a small town called Gumilla. It's a beautiful place. Do you have a home?" "Yes. I will visit my family after escaping." "Do you have a home?" Ethan answered and asked back. "No." Tony said after looking at him. "No." Ethan smiled and sighed. "So you have everything, but you have nothing." After a long time, the little leader brought people to check and found that Tony was working, so he left without paying attention. Tony made the parts of the Markai armor one by one without telling the kidnappers and welded some of them together. As time went by, even if the 10 Commandments members were uneducated, they gradually began to find that what Tony made was different from the Jericho missile in the photo. Having everything and having nothing. The first generation Uncle Ben sighed. Fortunately, the robber was smart enough to help Tony explain it, otherwise Tony himself might not be able to get through it. The first generation Kana smiled and said, and then continued to explain to the students the theory that the arc reactor might be used. Although he himself was not very sure, it was not a big problem to draw inferences from one instance to another. The main reason was that he and Toby Spider talked with Otto for a long time last night. He gained a lot of useful knowledge from Otto, and Toby Spider also benefited a lot, but the first generation Gwyn found it a bit difficult to listen. Rhodes smiled and said to Tony, "You have us now, not nothing." "Yeah," Tony answered casually, without commenting. Although they are all members of the Avengers, there is still a little difference in Tony's heart. Lazar stared at Tony's movements in the surveillance video, while testing the Mark armor. As his legs bent and straightened, the parts beside him also swung along, and he found some abnormalities. The next moment, Lazar brought people to Tony's workshop. Tony stopped his work when he heard the sound, and then Lazar walked in surrounded by members of the 10 Commandments. Tony and Ethan had consciously put their hands on their heads and looked at him nervously. Lazar smiled at Tony and said, "Don't be nervous." Hearing this, the two of them put their hands down at the same time, and Lazar walked to Tony, came up to him, and touched the reactor on his chest, but he didn't understand what it meant, and didn't care too much. Bows and arrows have always been cutting-edge weapon technology. Genghis Khan used them to sweep across Eurasia and dominate the world. He walked aside and looked at the parts made by Tony, saying as he walked, "The territory is 5 times that of Alexander the Great and 4 times that of the Roman Empire." He looked at Tony's drawings again, but today, only those who have Tony Stark's most advanced weapons can rule the world. Tony was a little nervous, worried that he would discover the secret of the drawings. Ethan on the opposite side quietly raised his palm to signal him not to be too nervous, so as not to be exposed. Sure enough, Lazar didn't see any problem with the blueprint. "That person. It will be me." Then he turned his head and stared at Tony. "Why did you disappoint me?" Ethan explained, "We are working very hard." Hearing Ethan's words, Lazar turned his head and looked at him and walked over. "I'll let you live. Is this how you repay me?" "This is complicated. He has tried very hard." Ethan defended Tony. Tony didn't understand what they were saying and was a little confused for a while. "Let him kneel down," Lazar ordered casually, and then 2 gang members forced Ethan to kneel down. Lazar snorted and laughed. "Do you think I'm stupid? I'll figure it out." Kneeling Ethan continued to defend. "We are all working," but Lazar ignored him and picked up a piece of red-hot carbon with pliers. Lazar blew gently at it, turned his head, and looked at Ethan with a smile. "Open your mouth. Do you think I'm a fool?" Looking at his actions, Tony also had an ominous premonition in his heart and asked, "What does he want to do?" Lazar grabbed Ethan's head and pressed him on the table. "What's going on? Tell the truth," Lazar asked fiercely. "He is making Jericho missiles for you." Even in the face of death threats, Ethan still kept Tony's secrets. "Tell me the truth," Lazar asked again in English. "He is making the Jericho missiles you want. Tell me the truth," Lazar yelled. Seeing that Ethan was in danger, Tony took 2 steps forward. "What delivery date do you want?" "I can." But as soon as he stepped forward, the 10 Commandments members on the side immediately stopped him nervously, and Tony quickly raised his hand. Chapter 205. Tony's actions caught Lazar's attention. Tony looked at Ethan and pleaded for him. "I need him. He's useful." Hearing this, Lazar narrowed his eyes, loosened the charcoal he was holding, and dropped it on Ethan's face. Ethan looked at the charcoal close at hand with fear. "Complete the missile assembly tomorrow at the latest." Lazar stared at Tony, threw the pliers aside, and then told his men to keep an eye on them. "This is troublesome." Tony Stark. Plans can't keep up with changes. "I wonder if his armor can be completed." George sighed and said, "He will be fine. Tony Stark will not die here." Garfield Spider said with a little ease, "Yeah." Cheyenne Moo said he would sacrifice himself for the war, so he will naturally be fine, but Ethan is not sure. The 2nd generation Gwen nodded and turned the conversation to Ethan, who assisted Tony. "Yes, we all know that Tony Stark will be fine, but Ethan, I hope he can escape safely with Tony." Aunt May prayed. "These gangsters in the Middle East are really crazy. They even want to become another Genghis Khan." George looked at Lazar with a little disdain, although he didn't know how powerful the Jericho missile could be. But no matter how powerful a weapon is, it needs someone to use it. Let alone Tony's unwillingness to cooperate. Even if it is really made, what will happen? How many rounds can be made? How many times can it be used? If they are really forced to use long-range missiles, to bomb without considering the loss. No matter how much they try, it will be useless. It's just that doing so will not make up for the loss. Ding, ding, ding. The camera turned. Tony kept knocking with a hammer, and the blue-white light of the arc reactor on his chest was so conspicuous. Then he put the hammered mask into the water for quenching, and finally placed it in front of Ethan, who was wiring. Tony wrapped his arms with tape, and Ethan helped him hang up the main body of the armor for use. Tony put on the protective gloves and neck guard that Ethan prepared for him. Because the Mark I did not have any shock absorption, Tony needed these things to cushion the vibration, so as to avoid the outside being intact, but the inside becoming a mess. Tony put on the armor with the help of Ethan. Tony tried it, and his fingers could be controlled as he thought. Ethan asked Tony to repeat the plan. 41 steps forward. Then, the distance to the door is 16 steps. 33 steps at the right turn. This was the fastest escape route they had confirmed in the previous days. Just as they were nervously preparing to execute the plan, Lazar walked into the monitoring room and found that Stark was nowhere to be seen, so he immediately asked someone to find him. The two members who received the information hurried to the studio where Tony was. Lazar approached the display screen and found that Ethan was standing behind a large iron plate and operating something. Two gangsters came to the door, shouting at them through the small window on the door, asking them what they were doing. Answer quickly. Tony immediately reminded Ethan. He speaks Hungarian. I don't speak. Ethan was a little flustered. You have to speak, even if you don't speak. Just say it. Tony still needs time to complete the assembly. Wait a moment. Wait a moment. Ethan shouted at the two people outside the door. The two people outside the door asked them to come out and let him see what they were doing. The camera came to the back of the door, only to see that there was a bomb installed on the door. As long as someone opened it, the bomb would explode immediately. The two saw that the person inside did not reply, so they opened the door directly. As a result, the bomb exploded the next second, and the iron door was blown away directly. The two fell asleep immediately. The explosion of the bomb caused a huge noise, and the people in the cave were alarmed. Lazar looked at the black screen and roared, "Escaped. Chase. Come on. Go. Go. Following his command, a large number of militants began to rush towards the studio. Tony couldn't see the situation at the door, so he asked, "How is the effect?" "OMG. It's very effective. Let me finish this," Ethan said in disbelief, and continued to screw in the screws with his hands. "Wait. Start the power program first," Tony ordered Ethan, so he immediately turned around and followed Tony's instructions. After Ethan successfully started the computer system to start the program, he immediately turned around and tightened all the hexagonal bolts. Tony could see that Ethan was very nervous, so he told him to just screw in the bolts. No need to be too particular, it was a disposable item anyway. Make sure all the detection points are correct, and then follow me out, okay? Tony was ready to act according to the plan, but Ethan's heart sank as he saw the progress bar that was only halfway through, so he muttered to himself first, then turned around and said to Tony, "We need time. Hey, I'll help you buy some time." According to the plan, Ethan, Tony shouted, but Ethan was unmoved and ran straight to the two members who fell asleep and picked up their guns. Ethan fired upwards while running. The militants who had just rushed overheard the gunshots from inside and were worried about their lives, so they turned around and ran out. Then Ethan, who kept firing upwards behind them, chased after them and kept shouting loudly to cheer himself up. But as Ethan ran to a corner, he saw that Lazar opposite him was pointing his gun at him with a group of people on the other side. Thanks to the time Ethan bought, the computer finally started the program. With the increasingly strong the sound, the lights around dimmed. The 10 Commandments members came to the door and found it was pitch black inside. The two sleeping members were lying on the ground. With the urging of the man in front, the two behind them had no choice but to go in. Because there was no light, they could not find Tony, who was moving his palms at the first time. As the light of the arc reactor shone on a man's face, Tony punched him and sent him flying several meters. He was still shooting in the air with the gun in his hand. Seeing the sudden change in the situation, the gangsters outside the door began to fire indiscriminately at the inside. After running out of bullets, they breathed a sigh of relief and turned their heads and said, "What's so scary?" But just as he finished speaking, Tony appeared in front of them wearing Mark I, slapped the two people on the left and right and sent them flying into the wall, and then walked straight towards the last person. Seeing this, the other party kept firing, but could not cause any damage. To Mark I, Tony punched him and knocked him down. With the dim light, Tony wearing Mark I completely appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 206. Cool, man. Tony Stark, this is so cool. So crazy. See, Harry, this is a mecha. Toby Spider cheered and shouted to the first generation Harry. Yeah. I saw it. It's amazing. He really did it. The first generation Harry was also shocked. Only boys can understand the charm of mecha. I wanted one when I was a child, but unfortunately I never had the money to buy it. Toby Spider said with a face full of memories. You can buy it now, ha ha ha. Harry teased. Oh, now I want Tony Stark's more. It must be cool if I wear it. Toby Spider shook his head. That was his lost childhood. Don't you care about Ethan? He seems to have been caught. The first generation Gwen looked at the two people who were only paying attention to Mark I and couldn't help but complain. Ah, yes, Ethan, damn, he won't be in trouble. After being reminded, Toby Spider realized that he was pointed at by Lazar and his men with guns. Compared with Toby Spider, Garfield Spider is more curious about whether Osborn Industries can produce similar armor in the miniature arc reactor. The second generation Harry said that this kind of armor is just child's play, just like the armor he wore in the sky before. With the glider, it must be much better than the Mark I made by Tony. But there is no comparison. Tony's conditions are too simple, and the cost effectiveness is not the same as the armor they spent a lot of money to build. Not to mention that the focus is not on that armor, but on the miniature arc reactor on Tony. That is the top priority, because the endurance of armor is a big problem. Even Harry's armor is no exception. With that thing, it means there is a new energy source. The second generation Harry's company also has a project under research. And because they refer to the tragedy of the first generation of Otto, they are much stricter, but the progress is still very slow. Tony kept moving forward in his armor against the firepower of the bandits. The dense bullets hit his Mark I and could not break through the defense. The two militants got angry and rushed towards Tony, shouting. Tony slapped him to the side and then punched the oncoming bandit several meters back. Then Tony continued to move forward and knocked down another militant with a slap. Seeing that the situation was not good, the other bandits immediately started to run away. A bandit who was left behind turned around and shot Tony, but his own people behind him closed the door and locked him outside. He knocked on the door frantically, and Tony's shadow behind him gradually enveloped him. As the shouting outside the door stopped, the door shook violently, and then a dent appeared on the steel door, followed by another one, and a smarter one immediately began to run away. The others followed closely, and then Tony broke the door in half. A gangster ran to Tony in a panic, and Tony knocked him down with an elbow. But this also got his arm stuck in the stone. Tony immediately tried to break free. Seeing this, a gangster took a pistol and shot Tony in the head. As a result, the bullet rebounded and hit him, and he lay on the ground on the spot. Tony, who heard the movement, turned his head and looked at him, and then suddenly pulled his arm out with force. Lazar loaded the grenade into the gun and calmly walked to the entrance of the cave to wait for Tony, only to see Ethan lying on the side coughing up blood. Tony walked around the corner and saw him, and immediately shouted his name. Be careful. Ethan ignored his own injuries and instead shouted to Tony. Lazar took advantage of Tony's distraction to fire a grenade at him. Tony came to his senses and quickly dodged sideways. The grenade blew a hole in the cave behind him. Tony immediately turned on the launcher on his left arm and fired a missile at Lazar. Although the missile did not hit him directly, but the explosion caused by hitting the mountain wall produced a lot of rubble and pressed him underneath. Tony came to Ethan's side. At this time, due to excessive blood loss, his face had become extremely pale and the whole person was extremely weak. Come on. We should go. Go quickly, we have an appointment first. We can't break our promise. Tony took off his mask and looked at Ethan lying there, trying to cheer him up. No. The situation is constantly changing. Stark. As a doctor, Ethan knew that his condition was not good and Tony would not be able to escape with him. You have to go back to visit your family. Get up quickly. Tony wanted to use his family to encourage Ethan to live. Point desire. My family is dead. I'll go visit them now. Stark. It's okay. I want this. I want this. Ethan was getting weaker and weaker, and his voice was getting smaller and smaller. Tony exhaled heavily, his eyes slightly red. Thank you for saving me. Don't let me down. Don't make a meaningless sacrifice. Ethan died as soon as he finished speaking. Ethan. Tony sighed, and he would still feel sad when he witnessed Ethan's death again. Ethan could be said to be his life mentor. Admirable courage. As a doctor, he kept his gun pointed upwards while buying time and never pointed it at others. Maybe he didn't want to hurt others from the bottom of his heart. Captain America also sighed softly. Ethan was just an ordinary doctor, but he was also one of the greatest heroes in the world. Yeah, I never doubted this. Tony took 2 deep breaths. Tony suddenly asked, can you revive him? Yes. But Ethan doesn't want to. He is reunited with his family in the place of death and doesn't want to come back to this cruel world. Cheyenne seemed to have expected it and answered Tony's question directly. Tony fell silent after hearing it. He just asked casually, but Cheyenne seemed to be able to revive the dead. What was even more unexpected was that Ethan didn't want to be resurrected and reunited with his family in the place of death. Tony touched his chin and wondered what this meant. Ethan, Tony Stark's spiritual mentor, he made Tony realize the true meaning of life. Without him, there would be no Iron Man. He changed Tony Stark's life. And Tony also implemented Ethan's words with his life. He did not disappoint Ethan's expectations, and he never made unnecessary sacrifices. He gradually sublimated from this moment. During the Battle of New York, it was Tony Stark who rushed into the space wormhole with the belief that he would die and sent the strategic nuclear bomb that should have completely destroyed most of New York to the enemy fleet. And at this time, he was lucky enough not to be favored by death, so he survived by chance. During the Infinity War, he also fought with the belief that he would sacrifice himself, so he would not hesitate to end the war with his own life. Unfortunately, he was not so lucky this time. The extremely huge energy exceeded the load limit of the armor and directly took Tony Stark's life. When he said back quote I'm Iron Man, perhaps he had already forgotten Ethan's words, but was instinctively driven by the idea of wanting to protect others deep in his heart. Chapter 207. Talk about the Battle of New York and the Infinity War in detail. And what does death mean? Tony was still immersed in the sadness of Ethan's death, and Cheyenne narration suddenly revealed another big melon. So he didn't care about feeling sad for Ethan, stood up and shouted to Cheyenne, but unfortunately Cheyenne didn't answer his question and fell silent. Death. Thor supported his head and thought about Cheyenne name for death. It seemed that Cheyenne didn't refer to the term death itself, but more like calling a certain person or existence. The death that Cheyenne said should refer to the god of death, one of the 5 gods in the legend. Hearing Thor's words, everyone was stunned. Seeing that no one present understood, Thor popularized the existence of death to them, but this was just a legend, and Thor didn't dare to guarantee whether it was correct. Without any clues, everyone could only give up temporarily. After deciding, Egghead sent someone to check the relevant information about death, and then focused on the Battle of New York. New York War. The location is in New York. What does the strategic nuclear bomb that destroyed most of New York mean? Did someone launch a nuclear bomb at New York? Boiled Egghead frowned, and he immediately thought of many things based on the narration. Banner, Natasha and others beside him also frowned and thought. At this time, Captain America raised his hand and asked everyone, what does space wormhole mean? As an old antique from the old era, Captain America still has a lot of modern words that he hasn't figured out, even if he studies hard. Hearing this, kind Banner explained to him the principle of the possible formation of space wormholes. Captain America was confused when he heard it, and Rhodes solved his confusion with one sentence. Just imagine there is a hole. You can go directly from New York to Berlin by drilling through it. Captain America suddenly realized and immediately understood the terribleness of this space wormhole. Enemy fleet. Is it at sea? Carlson frowned and wondered which country's fleet could hit New York. Other 5 permanent members? There is another possibility that the enemy is not from the Earth, but from the universe, Nick Fury said. This may also explain why a nuclear bomb was launched at New York. It is a strategic nuclear bomb of great power. Let's assume that the enemy's space wormhole is opened in New York. Then the National Guard should be the first to act. If the enemy is an alien, then with the technology of our Earth, we must not be a match, and the battle may be one-sided. As soon as the egghead said it, everyone understood. So the nuclear bomb was not launched by the enemy, but by ourselves, to try to stop the continued invasion of the alien army. Rhodes, as a soldier, has a very keen sense of smell, and added, "Yeah." Nick Fury nodded. As for why Tony Stark risked his life to send this nuclear bomb into the space wormhole, perhaps it was because there were still countless people in New York, and they had no way to continue to resist. If they were forced to launch a nuclear bomb on their own land, it can only mean that the National Guard collapsed across the board, and the senior staff believed that New York was powerless, so they wanted to completely destroy New York. Hill also expressed his thoughts. So Tony Stark didn't want to suffer countless casualties, so he risked his life and sent him to the enemy fleet, and then destroyed the enemy fleet with a strategic nuclear bomb. To be honest, this is a bit of a fantasy. Although Captain America doesn't know much about modern knowledge, he has also looked up the most powerful weapon, the nuclear bomb. But even so, he still finds it hard to believe that the nuclear bomb can destroy the enemy's fleet. Yeah, I don't quite believe it either. The Sky Curtain didn't tell us how the New York War ended. There may be other factors besides this nuclear bomb. Tony nodded and agreed with Captain America's statement. Speaking of the universe, where is Carol? Where is she? Tony looked at Egghead and asked. She has something on another planet. I will leave her a message and ask her to return to Earth. Egghead explained to everyone why Captain Marvel was not on Earth, but he didn't know what it was. And the huge energy. Do you have any clues? Tony asked, a little frustrated. He has been trying to increase the energy load of the armor, but the latest armor has reached the limit of what he can do. He has no better way to improve now. He thinks that if he continues to bear the huge energy, he will still die. No, maybe the cosmic cube can tell us the answer, but unfortunately our research is not enough. Egghead shook his head slightly. Although Tony and Banner joined this plan, they spent more time studying the armor. They only paid attention to the research on the cosmic cube. Occasionally, points Dr. Eric Shavag is still researching. Well, the New York War and the Infinity War sound pretty scary. Tony shrugged, then stood up and prepared to go back. Today, he was supposed to talk about the Avengers Civil War, but the New York War came out. Everyone dispersed, and at the same time, the American government was unbelievable about the information revealed by the Sky Curtain. They actually launched a nuclear bomb on their own land, and the target was a super city in New York. A large number of New Yorkers were terrified. No one knew when the New York War that the Sky Curtain said would happen. What if it was tomorrow? Or the day after tomorrow? For a time, many panicked citizens began to flee New York. Those who returned to their hometowns returned to their hometowns, and those who moved to new homes moved to new homes. Except for those who have been settled in New York and have nowhere to go, a large number of other migrant populations began to stay away from New York to prevent the war from burning them. Even if the New York City government kept persuading and guaranteeing to protect their safety, it was still useless. The whole of New York began to be in turmoil. At the same time, there were many $0 purchases. The whole of New York was in chaos. A large number of police forces began to be dispatched to maintain order. At the same time, Banner's former father-in-law, General Ross, received the highest order from the president, ordering him to bring a most elite army with the most advanced weapons and equipment to New York, always be prepared for war, and suppress the $0 purchase phenomenon. A large number of military construction companies also began to gather in New York. They want to build a large number of permanent war facilities in New York. If the war really happens, the US government said that they must let the other side taste their power. When Tony learned about the riots in New York, it was already evening. He had just rested and had dinner, and saw the news report on today's chaos. so he also wore armor and went out in person to help the police quell the turmoil. Toby Spider, Garfield Spider and others did not know what happened to Tony Stark and his friends, but many people in New York where they were located also firmly believed that the war would happen in New York City where they were. Therefore, it also caused a certain degree of riots. Toby Spider and Garfield Spider also spent a lot of time to deal with these $0 blacks. Fortunately, they didn't have Tony Stark on their side. After the New York mayor urgently held a press conference to clarify the facts, those people finally calmed down. It just exhausted Toby Spider and Garfield Spider. They didn't stop all night. There were smashing, looting, and burning everywhere. Most of them were homeless people. When they returned home tired and fell asleep, it was already bright and the sun was high in the sky. Chapter 208. Outside the cave, several armed men pointed their rifles at the dark entrance and heard the sound of bang 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 coming from inside, which became louder and louder. The figure of Markai gradually emerged from the darkness. Seeing Tony coming out, the little leader immediately shouted, "Everyone shoot!" Everyone immediately opened fire, and a large number of bullets hit Tony's armor. When they had used up all the bullets, Tony said lightly, "It's my turn." Then he controlled the flamethrowers on his arms and sprayed a large amount of flames on them. Except for the enemies on the left and right who escaped by luck, the others were ignited. Tony walked and sprayed fire to the left and right. The high temperature hot flames directly detonated the ammunition boxes on the scene, and an unlucky enemy was blown away immediately. He burned all the weapons produced by Stark Industries to prevent these terrorists from using his weapons to harm people. Just as Tony was walking forward, an enemy on the hillside not far away started to operate a fixed machine gun and fired wildly at Markai, forcing Tony to raise his arm to block the bullets. The other surviving militants immediately took the opportunity to fire continuously at Markai under the heavy fire. The control chain of one of Markai's legs was broken. Tony was also forced to half kneel on the ground. He found an opportunity when the enemy was changing ammunition and immediately began to spray fire. At the same time, the ammunition boxes that had been burning before gradually began to explode. Many enemies immediately began to flee backwards after seeing this terrible scene. Tony took the opportunity to stand up and turned on the switch on his arm to control the ejection, and the Mark armor immediately soared into the sky. The next second, the entire valley was shrouded in the explosion caused by many ammunition boxes. In the raging flames, Tony rushed straight into the sky and rushed out of the flames. After launching into the air, it lost power, and the entire Markai immediately lost inertia and began to fall down under the action of gravity. Tony only had time to let out a horrified scream, and the whole person immediately fell into the desert. The soft sand relieved a lot of impact, and the rest was absorbed by the Markai. The smoke and dust dissipated, and the landing point was full of debris. Tony's half-body was buried in the sand. Although most of the power was blocked, the remaining part still caused Tony to suffer certain injuries. I saw him take off his mask, and there were some blood stains at the corners of his mouth. He took a deep breath and said, "Not bad. Wow. It's really exciting." Toby Spider said to Uncle Ben while wolfing down. "Yeah. Last night was also exciting." Uncle Ben nodded and glanced at the TV. The host was still reporting the chaos last night. "After so many years, this is a rare large-scale chaos. Haha, yeah. It's really chaotic. I forgot how many people I hung up last night. It's crazy. Unbelievable." Toby Spider swallowed the fried egg in one gulp, took a breath, and complained about what happened last night. New York War. Just hearing the name, you know how terrible it is. They even launched a nuclear bomb at New York. I don't even dare to think about how hard they were forced to do this. Uncle Ben sighed. Even the most uneducated people knew what it meant to launch a nuclear bomb in their own country, but Tony Stark's government still did it. This made him start to imagine what would happen if such a war happened in New York City where he lived. It was probably similar. Uncle Ben didn't think that relying on just one or two superheroes could solve such a huge crisis. Even if he advocated personal heroism, he had to consider the actual situation. Toby Spider and others were mortals after all. Facing the army, even if Toby Spider's spider sense was fast, he couldn't avoid tons of bullets shooting at him, not to mention powerful missiles and even nuclear bombs. Tony, covered in wounds, wrapped his head with a piece of cloth and staggered in the desert. Just when he was about to give up, 2 armed helicopters flew over his head. He immediately waved excitedly and shouted, "Hey, ha ha ha." After seeing the plane on his side, Tony couldn't stop being excited and waved his hands. The pilot found him and landed in front of him. Tony knelt on the ground excitedly, and the big stone hanging in his heart finally fell to the ground. Rod ran towards him quickly with several team members, and the first sentence was, "Where is your happy Hummer?" Tony smiled bitterly when he heard this. Rod patted his shoulder, half squatted down and said, "Don't next time leave me again, okay?" Then she hugged him. As the plane landed, the medical staff were ready. Pepper stood in front waiting for Tony, and Happy was wearing sunglasses behind her. The lifting platform fell. Rod helped Tony up from the wheelchair and walked towards them. Tony's right hand was still in plaster. 2 beautiful medical staff pushed the operating table. Tony took a look and said, "I'm not that bad yet, let them leave." Rod waved his hand after hearing this. Seeing Tony return safely, Pepper couldn't help but smile. Tony walked up to her. "Your eyes are red. Are you worried about your boss?" "These are tears of joy. I hate looking for a job." Hearing the familiar tone, Pepper concealed her worries. "Okay, the vacation is over." Tony nodded and got into the car. "Where are we going, sir?" Happy asked from the driver's seat. "Take us to the hospital please, Hogan." Pepper said immediately no. Tony disagreed. Hearing Tony's words, Pepper turned around in surprise. "No, Tony, you must go to the hospital. You must have an experience. If I say no, then no. I don't need to do anything. I've been locked up for 3 whole months. I only want to do 2 things now. One is to eat American cheeseburgers. The other is to want." Tony looked at Pepper. His expression seemed a little serious, but before he finished speaking, he was misunderstood by Pepper. "Stop talking." Pepper thought Tony wanted to find a woman, so she turned around and interrupted him. "It's not what you think. I want to hold a press conference." Tony knew she must have thought wrongly when he saw her expression, and hurriedly said his second idea, "Hold a press conference? Why hold a press conference?" Pepper looked confused. "Yeah, Hogan, drive. Let's go eat burgers first." Tony ignored Pepper's question and directed to Happy. Chapter 209. Garfield Spider looked at the lights of New York City below and reached out to hold the waist of the beauty beside him. "Cheeseburgers. It seems that he has the same hobby as me. I love to eat them too. But it will make me fat." The second generation Gwen saw Tony's reaction of wanting to eat burgers at the first time, which made Garfield Spider think she was very cute. "If you want to eat, I can buy it for you. Just exercise more after eating." Garfield Spider smiled beside her. "No, losing weight is too difficult. No one wants you if you are fat." Gwen pulled Garfield Spider's arm, held him, and buried her head in his chest. "Others don't want you, but I must have you." Hearing Gwen's words, Garfield Spider lowered his head and looked at her and said, "Really?" Gwen raised her head and glanced at him, and then the two gradually approached. At this time, the sound of the police siren suddenly interrupted their actions. "Oh, it's endless." Garfield Spider sighed, turned his head, and looked in the direction of the police car. From last night to today, he encountered more $0 purchases than in the past month. Gwen smiled, kissed him lightly on the lips, then pulled down her mask. Garfield Spider took a breath and pulled down his hood, and the two fell down together. Happy drove to the press conference venue, and the people who had heard the news applauded. Several soldiers with live ammunition stood on the roadside to maintain order. Abadia walked over quickly with a very happy look and helped Tony open the door. Tony wiped his mouth and hugged him. "Tony, I thought I had to go to the hospital to see you. Let me see you first." He looked at Tony and smiled. No, I'm fine," Tony said while looking around at Happy's figure. Happy circled around and came behind him. Tony reached into the bag and took out the last small hamburger. Seeing Tony's actions, Abadia patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "Hamburger? Do you have to eat a hamburger? Is there one for me? Well, come on. There's only one left." Tony unwrapped the hamburger. Accompanied by Abadia, Tony walked into the venue while eating a hamburger. After putting the last bite into his mouth, Tony greeted the many reporters present. Pepper followed them and watched. Until now, she was a little bit unconvinced that Tony really escaped and came back to her. "Miss Potts, can you say a few words?" A man with a worrying hairline stood beside Pepper and shouted. His voice scared Pepper. Pepper was stunned for a moment and said, I'm not here for the press conference. And it's about to start. I'm not a reporter. I'm Agent Carlson. From the Strategic Homeland Defense and Logistics Agency. Carlson explained with a smile and handed her his business card. It sounds really confusing. Pepper couldn't help but complain after hearing the long list of names and took Carlson's business card. "I know, it's being simplified." Carlson smiled slightly. He was also troubled by the name, which was too convoluted. The Department of Defense, the FBI, and the CIA have all found us about this matter. Pepper didn't understand why so many people came to ask about it. "We belong to another system. We specialize in this matter. We need to know about Stark's escape," Coulson explained to Pepper. Pepper turned her head and looked at Carlson and said, "I'll convey your meaning to him, okay? Thank you." Carlson thanked her. At this time, Abadia walked onto the stage and asked everyone present to be quiet. Then he leaned over and looked at Tony, who was sitting against the counter. Tony took out a burger from his pocket and said, "Hey, everyone, sit down, okay? That way you can all see me. I can order whatever you want." After saying that, he took a bite of the burger. The reporters on the scene smiled and squatted down, and Abadia also sat next to Tony. "Didn't you say there was only one left? Where did this one in your pocket come from?" Rhodes and Banner followed Tony back to his basement, complaining while moving things. "After eating that, there is only one left. Is there any problem?" Tony looked at Rhodes and asked back confidently. "Okay, as long as you are happy. I don't expect you to leave one for me anyway," Rhodes said with his hands spread out. "Next time I'll treat you. Both of you have a share. But before that, have a drink first." Tony smiled faintly and waved his hand. The little robot automatically brought over a cart full of wine. Tony and the other two drank a glass each. Tony held the glass and said, "Cheers to Ethan, to myself." Then he drank it all. Rhodes and Banner looked at each other. It was understandable to toast Ethan, but what did it mean to toast Tony himself? Seeing Rhodes's eyes, Banner shrugged and said nothing, and drank the wine. Seeing this, Rhodes, who didn't know where to spit, had to drink it all. Rhodes didn't know what Tony was doing, and suddenly held a press conference, so he came to Pepper and whispered, "What happened at the press conference? Don't ask me, I don't understand what he is doing." Pepper complained about Tony. "I'm very happy," Tony suddenly said to Abadia beside him, while holding a hamburger. "Me too." Abadia thought Tony was happy that he was back alive, so he reached out and patted his shoulder. "I haven't said goodbye to my dad yet," he said calmly, and then repeated it loudly to the reporters. He put the leftover hamburger aside. "I still have questions that I haven't had time to ask him. I want to ask him what he thinks of this company, whether he has ever been conflicted or doubtful. Maybe he is not the same as we used to see in the newsreels. I saw young people being killed with my own eyes, killed by the weapons I designed to protect them." Abadia narrowed his eyes after listening to Tony's words, thinking to himself that it seems that Tony has discovered the weapons he secretly sold. "And I found that I have become part of a completely irresponsible system," Tony said to himself. Hearing this, the reporters present raised their hands one after another. "Mr. Stark." Tony pointed to a reporter and said, "Ask. What happened there?" The reporter in the front was curious about what Tony had experienced to make him say these words. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210. Tony stood up and walked to the podium. I finally woke up from my dream. I began to realize that I can do more for this world and society, rather than just blowing it up. So I plan to close Stark International's weapons manufacturing department as soon as possible. Hearing Tony's words, it immediately caused an uproar, and the reporters present became excited. Abadia immediately wanted to stop Tony from continuing, but no one could change what Tony had decided. He hugged Tony anxiously, trying to stop him, but Tony kept talking. Of course, that will have to wait until I have enough power to decide the future of the company, decide its development direction, make it develop healthily, and always keep in line with the highest interests of the country. Our main purpose today is to inform everyone that Tony is back and he is in very good health. The company will hold a meeting to discuss it, and we will inform everyone of the final opinion in a timely manner. Abadia came on stage to fool Tony's words, because he could imagine with his toes that the stock would plunge sharply if Tony's words were spread. Wow. It seems that he is very determined. That Abadia seems to be getting anxious. The first generation Gwen looked at Tony and said. Toby Spider nodded. Tony was going to touch the biggest cake of Stark Industries, so Abadia was of course anxious. After all, that is the most profitable business of Stark Industries, and it can be said to be the largest business, right? The military even specially arranged a lieutenant colonel to contact Tony. After experiencing Ethan's death and seeing those who were hurt by his own weapons, Tony Stark awakened. Even if this decision may cause him heavy losses, he did not hesitate. Since Ethan died, he gradually changed from Tony Stark to Iron Man, just like me. After Uncle Ben died, I also changed from Peter Parker to Spider-Man. Toby Spider empathizes with Tony's transformation. Only those who have experienced it can understand the pain, and only this kind of pain can make a person change quickly. People can't teach people, but things can teach people, and they can teach them. Under the Stark Industrial Building, Happy stood by the car smoking a cigarette. Abadia came to her side on a unicycle with a cigar in his mouth and asked, "Where is he?" "He's inside." Happy replied and walked up to hold his unicycle. Abadia swiped his card and walked straight into the building. Tony was standing by the railing, looking at the large arc reactor in front of him. "Look at this, it's beautifully done." Abadia walked in with his hands on his hips and sighed as he walked to his side. "Should I draw a bullseye on my head?" Tony asked without looking up. "Your head? It's my head, right? How much do you think the stock market will fall tomorrow?" Abadia questioned. "To be optimistic, 40 points. Tony certainly knew that his words would cause the stock market to fall sharply. "At least 40 points. Tony, we are a weapons manufacturer." Abadia leaned on the railing, and the stock market drop made him feel very unhappy. "Abadia, I don't want to pay the price of death. That's our duty. We consume steel to make weapons. My name is hanging on the company building." He didn't think it was a big deal before, but now Tony really doesn't want his name to be equated with death. "Everything we do is to maintain world peace and stability," Abadia said righteously, as if he was really a peace envoy. "That's not what I see. What we do is not glorious. We can do better, and we must find another way out." Tony had already thought of a way out. "Then what do you want to do? Do you want to produce baby bottles?" Abadia teased him. "We should reposition the technical value of the reactor," Tony said seriously. "Oh, come on. That's just a gimmick. Tony, come on. It's just to fool those who don't know." Abadia sneered at Tony's idea. How many years has this large reactor been produced? Now Tony suddenly wants to turn things around with this thing. Unfortunately, he is not an expert and doesn't understand the value of the reactor at all. Even if he already knew that Tony had shrunk it, it was no exception. "That's not a gimmick," Tony said calmly as he looked at the large reactor. "Yeah, that's a scientific research project, but it's not worth the effort. You and I both know it. The research on reactor technology can't go on, right?" Abadia walked around Tony, came behind him, and asked him tentatively. "Maybe." Tony tilted his head and said nothing. How could he bring up this topic if he was not sure? "Am I right? We haven't made any breakthroughs yet. It's been almost 30 years. Abadia's tone revealed a hint of excitement, and Tony heard the clue. So Tony turned around and looked at him. "Just tell me. Don't cover it up anymore. Who told you?" "Rod. Either Rod or Pepper." Abadia narrowed his eyes and urged, "It doesn't matter who told me. Let me see." I want to see. Okay, it's Rod. Tony unbuttoned his clothes and showed the macro reactor on his chest to Abadia. Okay. Abadia was a little shocked to see it with his own eyes. He helped him button up and couldn't help laughing. It works, Tony said lightly. This thing is still protecting his life from the damn shrapnel. Abadia breathed a sigh of relief, hugged his neck and smiled. Listen, Tony, we are in the same boat. If we work together, we will be extremely powerful. Just like your father and me. Sorry, I didn't say hello to you. Sorry, but if. Tony was interrupted before he finished speaking. Tony, don't do whatever you want in the future. Do you understand? At this time, Abadia acted like a kind uncle. My father often said this to me. Tony couldn't help but complain after listening to Abadia's words. Leave this matter to me. We are going to play a completely different new card. You will definitely be under a lot of pressure. You have to promise me that you must keep a low profile this time. The two walked and talked as they left the Stark Industrial Building. Chapter 211. Otto squinted his eyes and looked at the large arc reactor downstairs of Stark Tower. He wondered how it compared with the little sun he created in the sky. In reality, he was very cautious because he was worried that the tragedy in the sky would happen again. Until now, he still had no plan to conduct experiments. He was just constantly calculating data to ensure that everything was foolproof. Therefore, when he saw the large reactor of Stark Industries, Otto also had the same thought as Tony when he first knew him. It would be great if he could be in the same world with him. He really wanted to see the great technology he dreamed of with his own eyes. His experiment was currently stuck on how to stably control the little sun to convert and output energy, and Tony undoubtedly overcame this difficulty. Toby Spider knew Otto's thoughts very well, because Toby Spider had been assisting Otto's experiments for a long time recently. In addition to fighting criminals at night, he would come to Otto during the day when he didn't have classes. But even though Toby Spider had extremely high intelligence, he couldn't help Dr. Otto solve his experimental problems in a short time. Crazy money. Crazy Stark. Pepper sat in a chair and projected a video about Tony's announcement of the closure of the weapons manufacturing department onto the wall. The host on the wall was shouting that Stark Industries stock had fallen sharply, asking shareholders to flee, and smashed a cup into pieces with a baseball bat, used to describe Stark Industries' latest business plan, which was also in pieces. Pepper frowned and looked at it. Suddenly, Tony's voice came from his tablet. Pepper, how big are your hands? What? Pepper asked in confusion. How big are your hands? Tony repeated the question. I don't understand. Pepper frowned and wondered why Tony asked her how big her hands were. Tony ordered lightly, "Come down, I need you." Pepper had to put down the laptop in her hand, and the host's voice could be heard faintly from it. Unfortunate family. It has become a junk stock. It seems that Tony Stark's stock has fallen seriously. At least 40 points. The second generation Harry also has a deep understanding of this. After all, the assets of Osborne Industries have also shrunk by more than half. I hope those stockholders will not go to the rooftop. After all, there are quite a lot of us who go to the rooftop. Harry laughed at himself. The stock price began to soar since the discovery of the super spider that turned Garfield into Spider-Man. Then Connors developed the regeneration potion to reach the highest peak in history, and then Legislator wanted to directly use veterans for human experiments, which fell slightly, and then Connors injected the lizard potion to mutate, falling below the historical freezing point. Then Maximum, whose death from electrocution was concealed, caused a new round of decline, and then Harry injected spider toxins himself to become the Green Goblin, and fell sharply again and again. Osborne Industries has become the company with the fastest stock price fluctuations in history. I don't know how many shareholders have gone bankrupt because of this. These are all people who want to rely on the regeneration potion to rise to the sky. As a result, a series of accidents have completely smashed them to pieces, and Harry is also very anxious because of this. Fortunately, the spider couple Garfield and Gwen still stand firmly on his side. The confidence of many investors has been restored, and Connors has finally successfully restarted the research on the regeneration potion recently, which has slightly warmed up the stock price. Otherwise, Harry would be almost worried to death. She came to the underground garage and entered the password casually. Tony, with his upper body naked, greeted her with a new reactor in his hand. "Hi. Come here and let me see. Come here." He waved his hand, and Pepper raised her little hand and walked towards him. "What a delicate pair of little hands, I think. Please help me a little," Tony said, looking at the reactor in his hand. "Oh my god. That's what helped you escape." Pepper came closer and saw the reactor on Tony's chest and was immediately surprised. Tony raised the new reactor in his hand for Pepper to see and then explained. "Yeah. It's just that thing is outdated. This is a new model that I will rely on to survive in the future. I want to replace the old model, but I encountered a small roadblock." Pepper was a little confused. "What roadblock? What are you talking about?" Tony took out the old model on his chest and explained to Pepper. "Nothing, just a little trouble. There is a wire exposed under this device. It contacts the socket shell and causes a short circuit." Pepper took the old reactor in Tony's hand with a little horror. What do you want me to do? Put this on the table over there. It's useless." Pepper put it on the table while shouting, "OMG. I want you to reach in and gently pull the wire out." Tony looked at Pepper and said. Pepper asked, a little at a loss, "Is this safe?" Tony looked at her calmly. "Yeah. It should be fine. It's a bit like surgery. As long as you don't touch the mine, it won't go off." "What do you mean? Surgery?" Pepper looked at Tony with wide eyes. "It's a computer game. Don't worry. Pull the wire out gently." Tony comforted her. "Okay." Pepper tried to muster up the courage to slowly put her hand into the hole in Tony's chest, but as soon as she touched it, she immediately hissed and retracted her hand, as if she was electrocuted. I don't seem to be qualified to do this." Pepper didn't dare to do it. She was afraid that she would accidentally kill Tony. "What? No. You are qualified. You are the most capable, reliable and qualified person I know. You will do a great job." Tony looked at Pepper's face while speaking, and seeing her hesitation, he provoked her. "Are there too many questions? I really need your help." Okay. Pepper mustered up her courage again under Tony's provocation, and after taking a breath, she still reached in with her head held high. "Oh my god. There is pus in it." When Pepper came into contact with the electrolyte inside, she thought it was pus in her chest and screamed in horror. "That's not pus. It's just some inorganic electrolyte. What comes out of the instrument is not pus," Tony explained to her. "It smells terrible." Pepper was disgusted. "It really smells bad. That copper wire. Did you touch that copper wire?" "Okay. I touched it. Pepper nodded. "Very good. When you take it out. Be gentle. Tony screamed before he finished speaking. "Don't touch the instrument shell. I just kept telling you," he said after taking a breath. "I'm sorry." Pepper apologized while touching the copper wire out. "Okay. You have to be careful now. Don't take the magnet out together. It's underneath." Before Tony finished speaking, Pepper pulled out the magnet with electrolyte. Tony waved his hand helplessly. "That's it. You've already taken it out." As the magnet was taken out, the instrument next to it kept sounding alarms. Chapter 212. Oh god. Okay. How could this happen? Pepper subconsciously wanted to put the magnet back. Tony was so scared that he immediately stopped her. "Don't put it back. Don't put it back." "What should I do?" "I should." "What's wrong with you?" Pepper, who felt that she had caused trouble, was a little panicked. At this time, Tony took a deep breath, and Pepper looked at him worriedly. "Nothing. You moved too hard just now. I'm going to go into shock." Hearing this, Pepper couldn't help but yelled at Tony. "What? You just said it was safe. We have to hurry. Take this. We have to replace it as soon as possible." Tony handed her the new reactor. "Tony, will there be any problem?" Pepper was a little panicked. "I hope so." Tony smiled helplessly. "It will be fine. I won't let it go wrong." Pepper became firm. "Okay. Put it on the base. Be careful." She inserted the plug into the socket with a focused look, and Tony immediately shouted "AA." Anyway. Then he tore off the patch on his body, and Pepper couldn't help shaking her mucus-covered hands. Yeah. After wiping her hands, Pepper held the old model and asked, "What do you think I should do with this?" Destroy it. Burn it. Tony turned his head and looked at it and said and pointed at the new model on his chest. Don't you want to keep it? Pepper looked at Tony in surprise. Pepper, I have many problems, one of which is getting bored with the old. Hearing this, she blinked, looked at the old model and asked, anything else, Mr. Stark? No more. Miss Potts. After that, Tony turned around and waved to the little robot Benben and began to direct it to work. Pepper took it and walked out of the basement. I don't know what she was thinking. Tony looked at her back and knocked on the reactor on his chest. Fortunately you didn't throw it away at that time, otherwise I would have lost my life. Tony said to Pepper with a smile. Pepper nodded, and she was also very grateful when she knew about this afterwards. Yeah. Who knows what I was thinking at that time. I thought it might be useful to keep it, but I didn't expect it to come in handy. Thank you for saving my life. What gift do you want? Tony walked up to Pepper and looked at her closely. That depends on what gift you want to give me. Pepper smiled slightly. Then I have to think about it carefully. Huh. It feels so scary. The first generation Gwen looked at Pepper's hands full of electrolyte and shuddered involuntarily. Yeah. Girls are more afraid of this. But Tony Stark is really brave. Just let Pepper help him operate it. Toby Spider nodded. Maybe it's to avoid exposing the secret of the arc reactor? After all, this can be said to be the most advanced technology. Speaking of this, how is Dr. Otto's research going? The first generation Gwen asked curiously, because her physical chemistry has always been a weakness, so she couldn't participate in Otto's experimental research. Toby Spider spread his hands. It's still stuck at the original point. The doctor is currently studying the cold nuclear fusion used by Tony Stark and wants to get inspiration from it. Oh, so. Then I can only hope that he will succeed soon. The first generation Gwen nodded and wished. Yes. Sooner or later there will be such a day. I believe. Toby Spider hugged her waist and smiled. At a certain military airport, a newly developed fighter plane of the US military slowly landed. Rod walked in front of a group of officers, talking about his thoughts as he walked. The future king of the sky. Is it a manned aircraft or a drone? Based on my years of experience, no drone can ever replace the innate intuition and insight of a pilot, and the ability to analyze and solve problems or the ability to judge in complex situations. As Rod was talking, Tony suddenly appeared and interrupted him. Tony teased him, Lieutenant Colonel. What if it was an inorganic person? Rod didn't care about Tony's teasing and smiled at everyone. Look at our alien. Mr. Tony Stark. Hello everyone. Speaking of people and no people, men and women, it reminds me of his embarrassing incident during spring break that year. Remember it was spring break. Tony immediately started to expose his past embarrassing incidents in response to Rod's counter-teasing. The pretty girl you dated in 1987. Turns out she was a man. His name is Ivan, right? Tony's words caused laughter among the people present. They believed that they were professionals and would not laugh under normal circumstances unless they couldn't hold it back. Tony, don't do this. Don't do this. They will take it seriously. Don't do this. Rod looked helplessly at Tony, who was tearing him down. Okay, nice to meet you. Tony turned around and looked at them. Oh, damn Tony. Rod covered his face. Now it was his turn to experience the social death of Djokovic and Alexei, but he was even more exaggerated. Cheyenne Mu actually exposed the fact that he had hooked up with a transgender person. At this moment, he really wanted to tear Tony's mouth. Oh, I feel like I'm in trouble. Tony, who was flirting with Pepper, couldn't help but cover his forehead. He didn't expect that the embarrassing thing he said casually at that time would be exposed. This time Rod was afraid to come to fight with him. Tony frowned and thought about how to fool Rod. The next second, his cell phone rang. He picked it up and saw that it was Rod calling. Hey, Rod, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Tony took the initiative and acted decisively. Rod was so angry that he had nowhere to vent his anger in the face of Tony's sincere apology. He always felt like he was punching cotton, and finally he was extinguished by Tony's eloquent words. Every time he got angry, he was always controlled by Tony, and this time was no exception. Chapter 213. Let's be alone for a while. Rod waved his hand to dismiss them, then patted Tony on the shoulder and smiled. I didn't expect it, I swear. I really didn't expect you to recover so quickly. I just learned to walk. Tony said lightly. Really? Rod folded his arms and looked at him. Yeah. Then Tony looked at Rod with a serious expression and said, Rod, I'm doing something big. I came here to find you. Work with me. Rod nodded involuntarily and smiled. You made everyone here very excited. I mean your amazing performance at the press conference. You are really amazing. This time it's not military goods. I won't. This is different. Tony said word by word. What? You really became a humanitarian? Hearing this, Rod tilted his head and looked at Tony with a weird look on his face. Listen to me carefully. Tony was about to explain to him, but was interrupted by Rod. No. What you need is to think things through first. I'm serious. Rod's expression was very serious. Hearing this, Tony narrowed his eyes, smiled, and nodded. Okay. Nice to meet you, Tony. Rod left after saying that, leaving Tony standing there alone and muttering to himself thank you. So what you wanted to tell me at that time was about the armor? It's a pity that I was blinded by the ghost and didn't participate at that time. Rod sighed on the phone. Although he now has Mark II, and Tony has also helped him strengthen it, it is still far inferior to the Mark Destroyer Eye that Tony has developed at this time. This is what Tony and Banner developed after studying the Destroyer armor. Tony's main goal now is to make it easier to wear, because the different materials make it impossible to add many functions to it normally. This is a pure combat killing armor, but it is still a little inconvenient to wear, and can only be worn with a mechanical arm. Tony tried to develop a system that can be remotely controlled and automatically assembled on his body. Tony admitted on the phone that he did want Rhodes to participate at the time, but unfortunately he didn't care at the time and didn't listen to him finish his words. In the Malibu villa, Tony was operating the computer while saying, Jarvis, are you awake? At your service at any time. Jarvis replied Tony immediately. I want to create a new project document. The code is Mark II. Tony said lightly while looking at Mark I on the computer screen. Jarvis asked, do you want to save it in Stark's central database? I don't know who to trust now. For now, we will temporarily store all the files in my private server. Before Tony found out who sold his weapons to the 10 Commandments, he felt that no one was trustworthy. He projected Mark I on the computer onto the table. Jarvis asked curiously, is this a top secret plan? Tony threw the unreasonable parts of Mark I into the virtual trash can and replied, I don't want it to end up in the hands of bad people. Maybe it would be better if I control it. The scene changed. In the desert, where Tony escaped, a group of people were digging for the wreckage of Mark I. Most of these fragments were buried in the sand. As one of them found the mask, he immediately shouted, Yusuf. Found it. As he looked, it turned out to be Lazar. He was not crushed to death by the rubble, but he had ugly scars on his head and face. The younger brother handed the mask to Lazar. He stared at the mask that Tony had worn before. I wonder what he was thinking? The camera returned to Tony. He was designing a foot for the latest Mark II armor. The little robot Benben was assisting him. While he was working, he complained that Benben was so stupid. With the completion of the work on the legs, Tony couldn't wait to start the first experiment. He turned on the video recording function and then stepped back to the middle of the field. Okay. Don't make any more mistakes. Return to the center from half a meter. He held the controller in his hand and started the manual control. Tony couldn't help but start swinging his legs. Okay. Start the manual control. Okay. Start the movement steadily and see if 10% of the thrust can be raised. Okay. 3.2.1. The countdown ended. Tony pressed the thruster switch, and the next moment he flew backwards and hit the ceiling, and then fell heavily to the ground. The firefighting robot watching from the side took the opportunity to add insult to injury and sprayed a large amount of fire extinguishing gas at Tony. Oh, you cannot release this. Tony tilted his head and said. Rod looked at Tony and asked, have you never calculated the power of the thruster? How should I know? I was very cautious and only used 10% of the power, but the result was still exaggerated. Tony rolled his eyes at Rod. Haha. Fortunately, I didn't hit you to death. Otherwise a savior would have died young. Rod looked at Banner, who was trying not to laugh, and glanced at Tony. Peter Parker looked at Aunt May with a puzzled look on his face. Why did Uncle Tony hit the wall directly? Although Tony was very reluctant, he finally accepted the name of Uncle Spider. Aunt May said hesitantly, because he has not been tested. Remember to be cautious when doing experiments in the future. Spider nodded ignorantly. Ha ha ha. Is it so embarrassing? Toby Spider couldn't help laughing when he saw Tony hit the wall and was stunned for a moment, completely forgetting the scene of hitting the wall when he first swung the spider silk. Yeah. It's so exaggerated at only 10%. I'm so glad he didn't use too much power at the beginning. The first generation Gwen couldn't help laughing. Then seeing Toby Spider's gloating look, he said, have you forgotten that you have been like this before? But you were not as miserable as Tony Stark. Oh, I remember. It was really embarrassing. Toby Spider remembered it after Gwen reminded him and stopped laughing immediately, but it was too late. The voice of the narrator sounded, the first generation Peter Parker, you like to laugh? You have a lot of embarrassing things. I gave you 2 points of face at that time, but it doesn't seem necessary now. After playing the story of Tony Stark becoming Iron Man, I will play the part of you not becoming Spider-Man. I hope you can still laugh then. Ward sent. Please. Please. Don't. Toby Spider immediately begged for mercy. He really didn't want the scene of him being bullied in school to be exposed. But unfortunately, what he said didn't count. Cheyenne Moo didn't reply to him. The first generation Gwen stared at Toby Spider with wide eyes and suddenly became curious about Toby Spider's history. At the same time, people all over the world began to look forward to it. Garfield Spider even widened his eyes in anticipation. Why were there only scenes of him being bullied and no scenes of the first generation being bullied? Chapter 214. After the first test failed, Tony was not discouraged and continued to study the Mark II armor. As time went by, the research on Mark II was constantly improving. Tony successfully used holographic projection technology to project the arm of Mark II. Then he tried his hand through the holographic projection and found that the simulation was very smooth, so he immediately built it according to the drawings. Just as Tony was still testing the function of the armor arm, while the iron was hot, Pepper came to the basement and saw that she was holding a box wrapped in craft paper and a cup of coffee in her hand. She walked in and asked, I've been calling you. Didn't you hear it? Yeah. I didn't hear anything. Tony replied without raising his head. Abadia is upstairs. Pepper said while putting the box on the table. Okay. I'll go right away. Tony said absent-mindedly. Hearing his tone, Pepper looked at him helplessly. What do you want me to say to him? Then Pepper saw the armor in Tony's hand and asked in confusion. I remember you said you would never develop weapons again. Tony put on the rough armor arm and raised it up. After hearing what Pepper said, he nodded. Yes. But this is a flight stabilizer. It won't hurt anyone. As he said that, Tony pressed the switch, and then the white light of the jet nozzle in the palm of his hand became brighter. After a sound of energy charging, bang, a light as fast as lightning shot out. Tony flew backwards directly. The sudden situation frightened Pepper, who subconsciously covered her ears and screamed. Pepper came back to her senses and looked in Tony's direction worriedly. I didn't expect it to be like this. Tony smiled awkwardly. Ha ha ha, Tony Stark, I didn't expect you to have this moment. Egghead couldn't help laughing. Since the sky screen, Egghead found that his sense of laughter was getting lower and lower. Natasha, who was reporting on the situation of Peter Parker and Aunt May, also laughed, and he laughed with her. It's not a weapon, huh? It won't hurt anyone, huh? Rhodes winked at Tony, and this wave of ridicule was almost in his face. Since the sky screen began to broadcast Tony Stark's deeds, Rhodes has been letting himself go more and more. Hey. Tony looked at Rhodes dissatisfied, but he had no choice but to pour him a lot of wine and decided to get him drunk. Banner watched them bickering happily and then interrupted. Fortunately, you didn't use the latest Mark Destroyer number 1 directly, otherwise you would be covered in bruises. When the armor was just made, Tony wanted to test it himself, but Banner thought it was unreliable and stopped him. Then Mark Destroyer number 1 opened a big hole in the ceiling of Tony's underground garage and then plunged into the sea. Yeah. Fortunately you stopped me. Cheers. Tony nodded and then raised his glass to Banner. You're welcome. Banner smiled and took a sip of wine. Tony ran upstairs into steps. Abadia was playing the piano leisurely. Tony asked, how is it? Then he looked at the pizza Abadia brought and said, it doesn't look good. Abadia continued to play Antonio's concerto in C major and denied Tony's idea. Just because I brought pizza back from New York, it doesn't mean that things are not good, right? Of course. Oh boy. Tony opened the pizza box and exclaimed when he saw the pizza full of ingredients. He couldn't wait to pick up a piece and eat it. Abadia stopped playing the piano. It might be better if you go in person. You told me to keep a low profile. I have always taken it seriously. You are in charge of everything. Tony disagreed with him and brought up what Abadia had said to him before to shut him up. Hey, come on. I mean the public and the media. But this time it's a board meeting. Abadia spread his hands and walked to sit next to Tony. Tony looked at him in confusion. He didn't hear any news about a board meeting. You said it was a board meeting? Abadia sighed. The board announced that you have post-concussion syndrome. They are applying for an injunction. A what? Tony couldn't help but look sideways. To stop your work. Abadia slowly told the bad news. Why? Just because the stock price fell 0.40 points? That's what we expected. Tony looked at Abadia in disbelief. It fell by 56.5 per share. Pepper corrected Tony's mistake. The company's stock price fell more seriously than Tony thought. What does it matter? We have a controlling stake in the company. Tony turned his head and looked at Pepper. Tony, the board of directors has power too. They think you and your new ideas are not in the best interests of the company. Abadia explained. Then I'll take the responsibility for me and the company. This is a new starting point. Tony shouted loudly. Hearing this, Abadia opened his eyes and opened his mouth in surprise and looked at Tony. To be honest, the company should bear the responsibility. Tony turned his head and said to Pepper and then added as he stood up, it tastes good. Seeing Tony pick up the whole pizza box and leave, Abadia immediately wanted to stop him. Oh, come on. Tony. Hey, Tony. Listen to me. Seeing that Tony had no intention of stopping, Abadia quickly stood up and grabbed Tony's shoulder. I will try to turn this situation around. But you have to take action so that I can convince them. Let me take that to the engineers to analyze. Work out the technical specifications. Abadia pretended to be doing this for Tony's good, but his ultimate goal was to find a reason to take the arc reactor from Tony. Hearing this, Tony immediately said, no. I can use it to whet the appetite of the board of directors. Absolutely not. This can only belong to me. No discussion, Abadia. No deal. Tony knew the value of the miniature arc reactor on him, so he rejected Abadia very firmly. Okay, but this one belongs to me. Okay, you can take a piece. Seeing that Tony disagreed, Abadia took the pizza box from him. Tony took a piece casually, and Abadia looked at Tony's back and asked loudly, can I go down and see your work? Good night, OB. Tony didn't reply and ran downstairs directly. Chapter 215. Abadia, this old guy. Fortunately I was very cautious and didn't trust anyone at that time. Tony said to Banner and Rhodes. No one thought that this old guy was so bold, and I don't know how much arms he secretly sold. Rhodes also knew what happened at that time. But the most memorable ones besides Tony are Pepper and Carlson, who almost died in the hands of Iron Man at that time. Pepper still has lingering fears when she thinks about it today, and Carlson is used to wandering on the edge of danger. Let's talk about it. The last time Thor came to Earth, attracted the destroyer armor. If Natasha hadn't picked up Thor's hammer, coupled with Tony's entanglement, I'm afraid that few of the agents present would have survived. In the underground garage, Tony said to the camera, Day 11, 37th test, version 2.0. Because I have no choice. Benben is still a part-time firefighter. Tony turned his head and looked at the Benben robot, pointed at it and said, if you dare to spray me again, and I'm not on fire, I will donate you to the city university. After that, he officially began to prepare for the test. Okay, be steady. Pay attention. Just use 1% of the full thrust at the beginning. Tony got ready and took a deep breath. Ready, 3, 2, 1. The countdown ended, and the thrusters on Tony's palms and soles began to work immediately. Tony slowly flew up. He trembled in the air to maintain his body balance. Then the thrusters stopped working, and Tony fell back to the ground. Great. Stop pointing that thing at me. It's like I'm going to catch fire at any moment. Relax a little. It's not too late to do it when something really happens. Tony said excitedly at first, then turned his head to see Benben pointing the nozzle at him, and couldn't help complaining. Hearing his scolding, Benben lowered the nozzle like a wronged child. After the first success, Tony felt very confident, so he said directly, now adjust the thrust to 25%. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Very good. Tony flew smoothly and steadily again. Slow down. Okay. But soon Tony couldn't stay in place because his palm was in the wrong position and began to move backwards. Listen, I didn't want to come here. Although Tony tried his best to control it, he still flew uncontrollably to his car, and Tony cried out in pain. My car. My car. My car. The table. Got. Tony kept moving forward, and a pile of documents on the table were blown everywhere by the airflow of the thrusters. Seeing that he was about to hit the wall, Tony quickly stretched his hand forward to stop the momentum, and then flew backwards uncontrollably. Tony smiled bitterly. Ahahaha, it's not bad, not that good, not that bad. Okay, end the experiment. He finally figured out a little trick, returned to the original place and fell down. As soon as Tony landed, he saw Benben raise the nozzle high and aimed it at him. He immediately stretched out his hand in horror to stop it. No. Seeing Benben disappointedly lowering its nozzle again, Tony was relieved. He didn't want to be sprayed again. Tony exhaled. Yeah, I can fly. Wow, I thought he was going to hit the wall again. Garfield Spider smiled. Oh, come on. He is a super genius after all. How could he always make the same mistake? The second generation Gwen complained about Garfield Spider's whimsical idea. Okay, it seems that I underestimated him. He is really smart. It took only 11 days to achieve this level. Harizama seemed to have taken a long time, right? Garfield Spider nodded, admitted his mistake, and then sighed that Tony was really amazing. Yeah. Unlike you, you don't listen carefully in class, and even forget what you learned in the 8th grade textbook. Gwen took the opportunity to tease Garfield Spider. Although she has teased countless times, she always enjoys it. After each teasing, Garfield Spider will review the knowledge he has learned very seriously, to avoid making a fool of himself in front of Gwen again. This was also a way for Gwen to spur him on, and it just so happened that Garfield Spider was very fond of this spur. At this time, both of them were already in college, and they were both at Columbia University. They were considered stars in the university, a spider couple who openly showed their love. Fortunately, after the copyright fee incident, Garfield Spider strictly rejected all fans' requests for autographs. So many students who squeezed in desperately felt extremely regretful. It is worth mentioning that yes, there are a lot of students at Columbia University this year. There are even more who are screened out. Compared to Garfield Spider, who was expecting Tony to hit the wall, Toby Spider was more focused on the stupid robot who kept trying to spray Tony with fire extinguishing gas. It felt like this robot was deliberately going against Tony and wanted to spray him whenever it got a chance. If I can, I want one too. It feels so cute. If you were the one being sprayed, I guess you wouldn't think so. Uncle Ben poured a basin of cold water on Toby Spider. Aha. That's true. Toby Spider smiled when he heard it. He had already forgotten about the fact that Cheyenne Moo was going to expose him in school, and he would just deal with it as it came. Then he began to add the shell to the simple Mark II armor parts, and Tony picked up his mask. Jarvis, are you there? What's the matter, sir? Jarvis responded to Tony immediately. Turn on the alarm display. Import all selected programs from the system. With the assistance of Jarvis, Tony's mask immediately displayed a large amount of analysis information that appeared in his field of vision. Okay, how about it? Let's start the virtual test, Tony asked. I have completed the file import. The line is ready. Reset the priority and calibrate the working conditions. Jarvis scanned Tony's body. Check each control surface. Tony said as he looked at the data flashing on the panel. Yes, sir. Then under Jarvis's control, Tony's armor began to self-check, and every component on the silver mark second was retracted and released. Test completed. Prepare to turn off the power and start data analysis. Let's do this. Check the weather and air traffic control first. Start receiving ground control signals. Tony couldn't wait to fly into the sky and feel the feeling of freedom. Sir, I strongly object. There is still a lot of data that has not been analyzed. Jarvis immediately opposed Tony's idea. Jarvis, sometimes you have to be forward thinking when doing things. Ready? Come on. 3, 2, 1. As Tony's countdown ended, Jarvis ignited on time. Tony adjusted his body and rushed towards the exit in front. After spinning around, he rushed out of the Malibu villa. Chapter 216. Tony flew up into the sky, howling like a gorilla in excitement, feeling the pleasure of flying fast in the air. After turning around, Tony expressed his feelings. It's very easy to control. Then he increased his power and flew towards the city. The long-range detection function of the armor is very good. It can analyze what the distant objects are from a long distance. Tony flew over the Ferris wheel and could clearly see the child sitting on it by zooming in. The child saw Tony flying in the sky, opened his mouth wide in surprise, and stuck out his tongue, and didn't even notice that the ice cream in his hand fell. After getting away from the Ferris wheel, Tony suddenly wanted to know what the flight limit of the Mark II was. So he said, let's see how powerful it is. What is the record of the SR-71 Blackbird? Jarvis immediately replied, the altitude record of the SR-71 Blackbird is 85,000 feet. Sir. Records are meant to be broken. Come on. Tony increased the horsepower to the maximum and flew straight up. As the altitude continued to increase, frost gradually appeared on the Mark II. Jarvis immediately reminded, sir, icing at high altitude can cause major accidents. Keep going. Tony, who was already in a state of excitement, didn't care so much. He shouted and continued to rush up. But soon there was more and more ice on the Mark II, and then the leg thrusters emitted some sparks and stopped working. The lights on Tony's mask also began to flicker. Finally, it went out, and the entire armor completely lost power, and then began to fall downwards. Tony also screamed in horror. In the pitch black armor, Tony said anxiously, we are frozen. Jarvis, adjust the ailerons. Jarvis. But the armor that had lost its power supply could not contact Jarvis. Tony fell from the sky in a spiral. Tony realized that he had to act immediately, otherwise he might fall to his death. Come on. The ice must be broken. With Tony's continuous efforts, he finally touched the switch on the outside of his thigh with his hand. As he twisted it, the ice on his body immediately broke apart. The armor began to recover power and restarted at a very fast speed. Tony finally restarted the thrusters before falling to his death. Then he narrowly passed by the vehicle on the ground and flew up again. The driver on the road was startled by him. Tony, who survived the disaster, shouted excitedly, and then he quickly rushed towards the Malibu villa. As he balanced his body, the armor slowly hovered half a meter above the roof. Shut down. Tony ordered calmly. The next second, the heavy armor smashed through the ceiling and then smashed on the piano. Abadia couldn't play the piano anymore. It pierced through the floor again and smashed on a blue sports car in the garage. The huge noise caused the alarms of many sports cars in the garage. Ben aimed the nozzle at Tony lying in the car and started spraying. Tony, who was sprayed with fire extinguishing gas, tilted his head back helplessly. Tony, you actually did such a dangerous thing. Why didn't you tell me? Pepper saw this and immediately rushed downstairs to question Tony. I'm sorry, Pepper. I don't want you to worry. Really? Facing the angry Pepper, Tony decisively apologized again from the bottom of his heart and vowed that he would never take risks again. Even though Tony repeatedly assured her, Pepper's anger was still hard to dissipate. Rhodes and Banner looked at each other and left directly. They didn't want to be in the way of the couple's quarrel. Wow. This is too dangerous. He almost fell to his death. Tony Stark. Is it so extreme? Toby Spider said with his head tilted. Yeah. This is really crazy. The first generation Gwen was still in shock. She was so nervous that she sweated. Although she knew that Tony was unlikely to die, she couldn't help but feel nervous when she saw this situation. This is human nature. Toby Spider looked at the first generation Gwen, took her hand, and looked at it. There was a lot of sweat in her palm. Don't worry. Tony Stark won't die so easily. Toby Spider comforted her. The first generation Gwen was just emotional just now, and now she is much better after calming down. Ha 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 ha. Ben finally succeeded. Garfield Spider and the second generation Gwen laughed non-stop. They were more rational. Although they were still a little worried, they did not forget the real cause of Tony's death. Instead, they saw Ben taking the opportunity to scold Tony Point laughing so hard. Harry wanted to know which was better between Tony's armor and the Green Goblin armor made by Oscorp, but it seemed that the mobility of Mark II was higher than that of Green Goblin. But the Green Goblin armor had medical functions, which did not seem to be reflected in Mark II, so Harry felt that each had its own merits, but he asked the researchers to develop the hang glider to the mobility of Mark II. It was like Tony in real life. After seeing that the Green Goblin armor could even cure spider toxins, he couldn't wait to load a similar function on Mark 7, but since he didn't understand medicine, Banner was mainly responsible for this. As for the Mark Destroyer armor, that armor couldn't load these things, but it was still enough. Tony covered his head with ice and walked into the laboratory, picked up the coffee that Pepper had just brought her, and then noticed the box under the cup. Tony turned his head and looked at it, and there was a note attached to it from Pepper. Tony tore open the brown paper, and inside was the old model reactor. Pepper also added a circle on it and wrote, "This thing proves that Tony Stark is a caring person." Looking at the line of words, Tony's mouth curled up slightly. The scene changed and came to a dark cave where the members of the 10 Commandments were trying to assemble Mark I. They compared the drawings left by Tony in the cave, and a member asked in confusion, "Where did you say the one on the chest went? It looks like it might be lost." Lazar smoked while looking at the Mark I that was barely pieced together. The scars on his face and his expression looked very hideous and terrifying under the dim light. Looking at the mask of Mark I, Lazar seemed to have returned to that day of heavy losses. While they were still trying to restore Mark I, they didn't know that Tony had already made a more advanced Mark II. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217. It looks like he is very unwilling to give up. Garfield Spider said, looking at Lazar's expression. Yeah. How can such an ambitious person give up so easily? And that Abadia, they often do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. The second generation Carners nodded. He was not only referring to Lazar, but also to Gustav Firth, the ambitious man behind the scenes, who was arrested by Garfield Spider and Gwen after hiding for many days. The FBI found a lot of criminal evidence in his laboratory and in the computers that had not been destroyed in time. He was powerless to turn the tide under the ironclad evidence. He confessed to the criminal plan he implemented behind the scenes and admitted that he and Mike conspired to kill Legitrata. This major case that shocked the whole country was finally solved, and the director of the FBI New York branch was relieved. God knows how long they have been scolded. That's why Garfield Spider came to tell Carners the good news today. Carners was also very sad when he heard it. In his opinion, Abadia was no different from Fields and McCann. Although it is still unclear why Abadia wanted to kill Tony Stark, Carners still believed that Abadia guessed that he wanted to completely control Stark Industries based on his personal feeling. It was like McCann wanted to bury the second generation Harry in the soil. Switching from the Mark I mask to the Mark II design in Tony's computer smoothly, Tony sat in a chair with ice tied to his left arm and was reviewing the situation just now. Record it. Above 40,000 feet, the main sensor failed a little. There is also a problem with the shell pressurization. I think it may be caused by ice. Your observation is very sharp, sir. If you intend to enter space, you must improve the shell material. Jarvis affirmed Tony's idea and kept recording Tony's words and words. Hearing this, Tony immediately said, "Contact SCO and ask them to reselect the shell material. Change it to the gold titanium alloy used by the Seraph tactical satellite. That way it can meet the integration requirements and maintain its power to weight ratio." Tony took a sip of chlorophyll juice. "Okay. Do you want to display the graphics according to the required specifications?" Jarvis asked. "Disney concert hall with red carpet. The lights are bright and lively tonight." Tony Stark, the third annual charity ball for the Firefighters Family Foundation. Just after Tony finished instructing Jarvis, the report of the host on the TV in front of him attracted his attention, so he asked, "Jarvis, have we received an invitation?" "No invitation record, sir." Jarvis did not find any invitation notification. The elites of Los Angeles upper class society gathered together. The initiator of this event caused controversy by speaking out loud at a press conference not long ago. He disappeared after that. Some people say he suffered from post-concussion syndrome. He has been bedridden for weeks. What's the situation? It's almost impossible to see him tonight. Tony put the Mark II armor on his face and watched the report of Zarliana Kid on TV. It happened that Jarvis had finished painting the spray painting effect. Tony took a look at the golden armor and thought the color was too exaggerated. Jarvis immediately apologized. "It's my fault. You have always been low-key and simple." Tony turned around and saw a red sports car when he poured chlorophyll for himself. "How about this? You add some red of the sports car." Tony tilted his head. "Okay, it matches your low-key image very well," Jarvis said lightly. Tony had just taken a sip of chlorophyll when Jarvis had already adjusted the color. Tony took a look and said, "I like it. Let's paint it after assembling it." Automatic assembly is starting, and it is expected to be completed in 5 hours. Tony glanced at his watch, which showed 10:09 p.m. "Don't wait for me, dear." Tony turned and left. How did he say that? Captain America spread his hands to express his incomprehension. How could the 4 words low-key and simple be associated with Tony Stark? Ha 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 ha. This is Tony Stark. The fact that you have this doubt only shows that you don't know him well enough, Captain. Nick Fury laughed. "Okay. It seems that I have to look up more information." Captain America shrugged. "I suggest you use a computer to check. There are many things on the internet that can be found with a single search." Natasha made a suggestion on the side. "I know, but I don't understand computers, and that mobile phone, I'm not used to it either." Captain America also feeling very distressed. 70 years have passed in the blink of an eye, and everything is different. Tony drove his silver luxury car quickly on the road, and the roar of the engine was so pleasant. Soon Tony drove to the venue, with the license plate clearly written Stark 4. As soon as he got off the car boy was already standing by and waiting to park for him. Tony's arrival quickly attracted the attention of the people outside, and they all shouted his name. At this time, Abadia was being interviewed by reporters. Weapons manufacturing only accounts for a small part of Stark's business. Our cooperation in the field of firefighting and life-saving is very significant. Before he finished speaking, there were cheers from many women on the side. He couldn't help but look over there. At this time, Tony was walking inside while buttoning his clothes. Christine Everhard saw Tony and took the initiative to greet him. "Hey, Tony. Don't you recognize me?" Tony said without turning his head. Of course. When passing by a familiar old man with arms around him, Tony patted his shoulder and said, "You are in good spirits." The old man turned around with a pipe in his mouth, but didn't find out who patted his shoulder. "He looks familiar." Toby Spider seemed to have seen this old man somewhere. "Yeah, I have the same feeling, as if I have seen him somewhere." The first generation Gwen also looked puzzled. "You know, in the sky, unless it is this world, people from other worlds cannot be found in this world. This has been confirmed by major media and government departments, just like Uncle Ben and Aunt May of the second generation. The government spent a lot of manpower and resources, but still couldn't find them. Now a very familiar person has appeared, and Toby Spider can't help but feel puzzled." Tony Stark also had the same doubt, because he suddenly found that he didn't remember when he greeted this old man. and he felt that the other person looked familiar. He was sure that he must have seen this face recently, but he just couldn't remember where he saw it for a while. So he immediately asked Jarvis to call up the previous sky screen video and started looking for the old man's traces at 8 times the speed. Soon Jarvis made a discovery. Whether it was the world of Toby Spider or the world of Garfield Spider, this old man had appeared before, and more than once. He appeared in every video of the sky screen. Chapter 218. Tony told Banner and Rhodes about his discovery, and they were also shocked. Tony analyzed the facial information of this old man in multiple universes, and was shocked to find that they were exactly the same. So he immediately chose to tell Nick Fury this information, wanting to know if he had any findings. After receiving Tony's message, Egghead put the documents in his hand aside. He had long felt that this old man was not right, and had arranged people to investigate early. Unfortunately, he did not find out anything, as if there was no such person in their world, until he saw Tony Stark greet the other party in the sky. He immediately sent people to investigate the list of the party. The shield acted very quickly and got it soon. Unfortunately, the old man's name was not found on it. At the same time, Jarvis also found the surveillance video of the party at that time. The video clearly showed that Tony Stark went directly to find Abadia, and there was no such old man in the surveillance video. Nick Fury, who had exchanged information with Tony, was terrified. He couldn't imagine what kind of existence this old man was, and how he could exist in the multiverse at the same time. Moreover, they couldn't find any trace of him at all. If the sky curtain hadn't revealed his existence again and again, they might not have found him in this life. This strange situation made the boiled egghead not know how to track him down. And Guyi looked at the old man in the sky curtain, and a look of respect appeared on her face inexplicably. Although Guyi couldn't detect the other party's true identity, it didn't prevent her from being able to perceive the other party's greatness. Tony walked to Abadia and asked, "What kind of world is this? Invite the guests, but not the host." Abadia smiled and said to him, "Look who's here. Hey, I didn't expect it. I'll go in and wait for you," Tony said lightly. Abadia called him, "Hey, listen to me. Don't be anxious, okay? I think I have convinced the board of directors. Got it?" Hearing this, Tony nodded without comment, and then smiled. "I was also impulsive. I'll leave later." Tony walked to the bar and said to the bartender, "Give me a drink." Coulson turned around and smiled at him. "Mr. Stark, I'm Agent Coulson." "Oh, yeah, that's it." Tony looked at Coulson and couldn't remember the name of the shield before it was renamed Strategic Homeland Defense and Logistics Support Agency. Coulson took the initiative to say, "Yeah, that's right. You have to change your name." Tony couldn't help but complain about this broken name, which was both difficult to pronounce and hard to remember. "Yeah, everyone says so." Coulson smiled awkwardly, then said, "I know you are not having a good time now, but we need to understand the situation. There are still many unknown problems, but time may be tight. Let's make another appointment. How about meeting at Stark Company at 7 PM on the 24th? Coulson was talking, but Tony's attention was attracted by Pepper in the distance. She was wearing a blue backless dress and talking to others. Tony, who was not interested in talking, stretched out his palm casually. "That's it. You are right. You are absolutely right." Coulson looked at Tony's suddenly stretched out hand and shook hands with him. "I will go to my assistant first, and then we will set the time." After shaking hands, Tony pointed to Pepper in the distance and said something to Coulson and walked straight towards her. To be honest, this name is really hard to remember. I heard him say it twice, and I didn't remember it. Garfield Spider looked at Tony and complained and said it. Ha ha ha. Mainly because it's too hard to pronounce. I have to split it in half to remember it. Gwen also covered her mouth and laughed. I hope they change the name as soon as possible. I really don't want to hear this name again. It gives me a headache when I hear it. Garfield Spider spread his hands. He is not a person with a particularly strong memory. Occasionally, fans take photos with him every day. It is sometimes troublesome for him to remember their names, and he also has to remember the name of Coulson's unit. Garfield Spider admitted that this was really embarrassing himself. Just to avoid the situation like Maximum, he had to be patient to remember it. Compared with Toby Spider and Tony, Garfield Spider did not notice this, although there was some disturbance during the campus war. But the heat soon subsided, and the things related to it were forgotten by others. She even forgot the existence of this old man. "You are so beautiful. I almost didn't recognize you." Pepper turned around and found that it was Tony. "Why are you here?" Pepper asked in surprise. Shouldn't Tony be hiding at home studying his armor? Tony explained to her, "I'm hiding from a government detective. Are you alone?" Pepper was a little surprised that Tony didn't find the girl to accompany him. Where did this dress come from? Tony was more curious because he had never seen Pepper wear this dress. Pepper looked down and smiled. "Oh, this is a birthday present. You gave it to me. Not bad. I have good taste." Tony boasted. "Yes." And Pepper also smiled. "Do you want to dance?" Tony looked at Pepper and asked. "Oh, no." Pepper shook her head. "Okay, come on." Tony ignored her refusal with a domineering look and took her hand to the dance circle. The two danced close together. Tony looked at Pepper's expression and asked, "Did I upset you?" "Oh, no. I forgot to put on perfume again today. And now I'm dancing with my boss with my bare back in public." Hearing Pepper's words, Tony praised, "You are beautiful and smell good." "Oh, God." Pepper lowered her head embarrassedly. "It seems that I have to fire you before you can relax." Seeing that Pepper was still nervous, Tony teased, "I don't believe it. Without me, you can't even tie your shoelaces." Pepper laughed when she heard it. "I want to try it for a week," Tony said dissatisfiedly when he heard Pepper's teasing. "Really? What's your social security number?" Pepper looked at Tony with a smile. Tony froze in the face of Pepper's question, and after a long while he managed to say 5. "That's right. You're still 8 digits short." Hearing Tony's answer, Pepper couldn't help laughing. "You're the only one left for those 8 digits." Tony looked at Pepper and began to dance attentively. After a while, Tony looked at her and asked, "Want to go out for some fresh air?" "Yes, I think so too." Pepper nodded, and Carlson looked at Tony with disgust in the distance. Chapter 219. Good guy. It took him so long to come up with a 5. Ha ha ha. Otto was directly amused by Tony. You said it, as if you could remember it." Rose rolled her eyes at him and teased him. "Hey, it's easy to remember that thing, but I'm more used to holding the card and reading it. Anyway, I have to carry it with me," Otto said to Rose, who teased him. "You have some sense." Rose was speechless about Otto's logic, but it was not a big problem because she also took the card directly when she needed it. The first generation Uncle Ben touched his nose guiltily because he didn't remember the number either. Fortunately, Aunt May next to him didn't say anything, and she knew that he couldn't remember it without asking. The two came outside. Pepper felt a little uncomfortable and said, "This is so weird." Tony said lightly, "Not weird at all. In fact, it's just the opposite of what you said. All my colleagues are here." Pepper touched her hot face. "We are just dancing. No one's watching." Tony thought it was no big deal. "No, you don't understand." Hearing Tony's words, Pepper knew that Tony was used to his position and couldn't understand how others saw this. "I think you're a little overthinking. We are just dancing." Tony always thought it was no big deal. Pepper explained to him, "No, it's not as simple as dancing. Because you are you. So you don't understand. Everyone knows your identity. Knowing that you've been a playboy, there's nothing wrong with all of this." Pepper realized that she was arranging the boss, so she added, "But when it comes to me, you're my boss. And if I dance with you, that would make me look like someone who's unscrupulous. I really didn't expect it to be like this. But I still think you're making a fuss." After Pepper's reminder, Tony realized what she was worried about, but he didn't care about these issues. "We are here, and I'm wearing this weird dress, and we are dancing like that," Pepper said, shaking her head. Tony looked at her, and the two gradually approached. Pepper closed her eyes silently. Just as they were about to kiss, Pepper suddenly opened her eyes and said, "I want a drink." "Okay, no problem." Tony immediately agreed and went to help her get the wine. Pepper took a breath and turned her head to add, I want a vodka martini. I want a strong one. And add more olives, at least 3. Tony came to the bar and asked for 2 vodka martinis and told the bartender all of Pepper's requirements and then stuffed a green bill into the glass. Handsome boss and beautiful assistant. Her worries are not unreasonable. After all, gossip is terrible. The first generation Gwen knew what Pepper was thinking. Even she, who had a relationship with Toby Spider in the Sky Curtain, but was not destined to be together, still had rumors. After they continued in reality, many women who thought they were very outstanding tried to attack Toby Spider, and the first generation Gwen was also very helpless about these swarms of flirts, but fortunately Toby Spider ignored these women. However, after these things, the relationship between the two became closer, and the two were inseparable, which made some people envious and jealous. George and Helen also knew these things, but they were very confident in Toby Spider. After so long in contact, they knew what kind of person Toby Spider was. Just when Tony was waiting for the wine, Christine Everhart took the initiative to come over. Tony Stark. Nice to see you here. Oh. Hey. Then Tony looked at her and thought for a long time, but couldn't remember her name. Kelly. Christine. The two spoke almost at the same time. Fortunately Kelly and Christine's pronunciation was similar, and she didn't hear that Tony called the wrong name. That's right. Tony's mouth twisted. Fortunately, as long as he was not embarrassed, then others would be embarrassed. You seem to be very open tonight. She looked at Tony and said. Tony's expression was a little stiff after hearing this. At least you should talk about your feelings for me. Christine Everhart looked at Tony and said. Panic. I feel very panic. Tony answered and urged the bartender. Wine. Hurry up. She tilted her head to look at Tony's expression, because I pointed out that your company was suspected of participating in the atrocities. I just came here at the invitation. I don't know anything else. Tony waved his hand. At the beginning, I believed everything you said. Christine Everhart said sarcastically to Tony. Hearing this, Tony narrowed his eyes and looked at her and said, I've been away for 2 months recently. Maybe you don't know. Is this what you call responsible? Christine Everhart took out a stack of photos from her bag and handed them to Tony. This town is called Gumira. Have you heard of it? Tony looked at the photos and found that they were photos of the members of the 10 Commandments occupying the village, and there were also a lot of Stark Industries weapons on them. Tony asked solemnly, when was it taken? It was taken yesterday. Christine Everhart looked at Tony with wide eyes. I didn't approve any transactions. Tony explained, but it was very pale and powerless. Your company did it. In her opinion, this was not much different from Tony Stark doing it himself. My company is not equal to me. Tony said, suppressing his anger, but his anger was not directed at her, because Gumira is Ethan's hometown, and now his savior's hometown is being destroyed by his own weapons. Those who secretly sell arms to terrorists are damned. Tony Stark has been staying at home, but after he closed the weapons manufacturing department, someone still secretly sold Stark Industries weapons. Seeing the tragic situation in the photo and the large number of Stark Industries weapons, people all over the world were furious. Damn Abadiastani. He must be the mastermind behind it. Uncle Ben II was very angry, and he could never tolerate such a thing. Poor Tony Stark has been taking the blame. Aunt May sighed. I hope he can stop this from happening. Providing weapons to terrorists? This is really crazy. Garfield Spider was also amazed by this. Gwen also nodded repeatedly. If it weren't for these guys like Alexei, why would her father have to face danger so often? Chapter 220. Tony immediately found Abadia, and the two confronted each other outside. Abadia casually pushed away the camera of the reporter next to him. Stop taking pictures, okay? Have you seen these photos? Huh? What's the matter with Gumila? Tony questioned him. Abadia whispered, Tony, you can't be so naive. You know, I was really naive before. They said, this is the bottom line that cannot be crossed. This is our business way. But what if we made a behind the scenes deal? Is there? Tony asked Abadia again, hoping to hear the truth from him. At this time, the people on the side didn't know their situation and called them to take pictures. Abadia went down the stairs. Come on. It's time to take pictures. Tony didn't want to make too much noise in front of the crowd, so he had to follow him to take pictures. Abadia smiled at the camera and whispered, "Tony, do you know who won't let you work? I'm the one who applied for the ban to the board of directors. I did this to protect you." After saying that, he left there, leaving Tony standing there staring at Abadia's back for a long time without saying a word. "Is that why you left me there that night?" Pepper glared at Tony unhappily. "Yeah. Listen, I'm sorry." "Pepper, really?" Tony raised one hand and looked at Pepper. Rod on the side pulled Banner, who was still working. Banner was stunned for a moment before reacting, and then followed Rod to sneak out of the basement. "Damn Tony. Always feed me dog food," Rod complained unceremoniously after coming up, and finally he took a look and Tony really blocked Pepper's mouth. In the area leading to Gumila, the 15-mile journey can be called a journey to hell. On the TV, a beautiful reporter was reporting on the situation in Gumila on the spot. "This is a new bloody colonization. A warlord supported by a new force drove the farmers and herdsmen living here away from the peaceful village. They were forced to leave their homes and become homeless. The villagers had to find a place to live in the ruins of other villages." Tony was adjusting the arm parts of Mark III while watching TV. "Or come here, to a steel mill abandoned by the former Soviets." Followed by fierce gunfire. The culprit of the recent violence is a group of foreign militants. The locals call them the 10 Commandments Gang. Tony saw the familiar face of Raza in the camera. As you can see, they are fully armed to carry out their missions. Anyone who dares to stop them will not escape the doom. Looking at the weapons of Stark Industries in the camera, Tony tightened the screws on the arm of the armor and slowly stood up. Without political aid and international pressure, the refugees can't see any hope. He walked to the TV and slowly raised his hand. "The woman next to me. She is asking for information about her husband. Her husband was kidnapped by armed men. Either he became a bandit, or he was shot to death." With a sharp whistle of energy gathering, a powerful beam of light spurted out from Tony's palm, and the reaction force made Tony's hand swing back violently. The powerful force directly smashed some things on the other side, and even a lamp on the ceiling fell down. The desperate refugees took old photos of their families and asked passers-by for news. A child asked naively, "Where are my parents?" Tony looked at the damage caused and couldn't help but curl the corners of his mouth slightly and slowly walked over. These refugees are on the verge of despair. They can only pray in their hearts someone will come to save them. He looked at his reflection in the glass, suddenly stretched out his hand, and fired a series of palm cannons to shatter all three sides of the glass. The first generation Uncle Ben looked at Tony's expression and said, "He is very angry. I can see that he is venting his anger on his own house, but this is not enough. I guess Tony Stark will help these refugees." Aunt May also echoed, "I hope he can send all these terrorists who are so bad that they can't be any worse to jail. Too many people, that's unrealistic, and Tony Stark doesn't look like someone who will hold back." Uncle Ben shook his head. Compared to Aunt May's idea, he was more inclined to think that Tony would kill these guys. Because Tony Stark also hated them to the bone. After all, he was imprisoned for 3 months, and his best friend Ethan was killed. Hearing this, Aunt May couldn't help but sigh, but she also knew that it was unlikely to just be imprisoned. Those bandits will not be caught obediently. Tony walked to a platform, and the bottom of the platform immediately began to deform, and the parts of Mark III slowly rose up. He stepped on the boots of the armor, and many parts immediately began to assemble on Tony under the control of the mechanical arm. As the armor continued to assemble, the arc reactor on Tony's chest also emitted a bright blue-white light, and the armor mask fell. The next second, Tony was seen flying in the air at high speed wearing Mark III. As the armor continued to accelerate, there was even a sonic boom, which showed that his speed had exceeded the speed of sound. The camera turned, and the refugees near Gumila were running wildly. The exhaust gas left by 10 missiles behind them was still in the air. A large amount of smoke and dust followed, and a large number of residents wanted to hide in their homes, but the terrorists kicked the door in and fired directly at the inside. The house next to it was full of bullet holes. Another terrorist threw a grenade into a house, and the house exploded the next second. Many refugees shouted for help and fled in panic. A large number of refugees were driven to a wall by these terrorists. They could only hold their heads in their hands and listen to the other party. The little leader who had been seen in the cave where Tony had stayed before was shouting loudly, asking people to put the women into the truck and unload the weapons on the truck. A man was driven out of his home with his family, and a terrorist hit the man's back hard with a butt of a gun. Please, please. The man's wife kept begging for mercy, and the little leader shouted, catch him, put him with others. Then a terrorist took the man away. Even though his wife kept shouting, she still couldn't stop him. His son broke free from his mother's arms and ran towards him. The man immediately broke free from the terrorist's restraints, ran towards his son and hugged him. The little leader came over with dissatisfaction. What's going on? Then he grabbed the boy's collar and threw him to another person, then dragged the man to the ground and stepped on his chest again and again. Stop talking nonsense. Be honest. Shoot him. All trash. After kicking him hard a few times, the little leader ordered the gunman next to him and then cursed as he walked away. After receiving the order, the terrorists immediately grabbed him and pointed the gun at him. His wife and children could only watch this scene in despair, and his son desperately shouted, Dad. Chapter 221. That's why the peacekeeping force exists. Nick Fury said to everyone indifferently. Is it still so chaotic now? What's the difference between this and the war years? Captain America didn't expect that after decades, there would still be many wars in the world. Those countries are very weak, without sufficient military and economic strength, and can only be bullied. Hill explained calmly, she had seen too many such things. Isn't there anyone to help them? Captain America couldn't help asking. Yes, but what's the use? If you are not strong, even if others can help you for a while, they can't help you forever. Hill explained. Tony has solved the problem there, but this is only a temporary solution. Without the 10 Commandments gang, there are other militants. This is inevitable. Nick Fury said indifferently, and Captain America could only sigh when he heard it. At the same time, the former villagers of Gumila saw the tragic scene in the past, and they burst into tears one after another, and the terrible memory came to their hearts again. Even more pitiful are those who have died in the war, who don't even have the opportunity to recall. Just when the whole family was in despair, a roar suddenly sounded. The huge noise attracted the attention of everyone present, and the little leader who was about to leave also turned around and looked up. In the surprised eyes of everyone, Tony fell from the sky wearing Mark III. As soon as he landed, an armed man shot at him directly. Tony immediately went up and punched him, knocking him out and falling on the broken building behind. Then Tony turned around and fired a palm cannon at a terrorist with a gun with his right hand, knocking him directly into the wall. Then he fired another cannon with his left hand to knock another person away. Seeing that there was another person shooting at him from behind, Tony immediately shot him with both palms. Tony wanted to continue, but several militants saw that the situation was not good and held many hostages and yelled at him, "Don't come over. Kill them if you come over." Faced with the threats of these militants, Tony slowly put down his hands and the light in his palm slowly went out. He silently watched these terrorists quickly lock their heads, and then a macro-magnetic magazine popped out from his shoulder after locking them all. The next second, bullets were fired from it, and these terrorists fell down at the same time without any time to react. The hostages were stunned instantly. The little boy just now broke free from his mother's arms again, shouting "Dad," and ran quickly towards his father. The man kneeling on the ground excitedly hugged his son. Tony slowly passed by them, and the boy stared at Mark III. The little leader watched this scene and hid behind a house, wanting to call for help, but the next second a metal arm directly penetrated the wall. He only had time to open his eyes wide before Tony pulled him over from the wall, and a big hole was directly broken in the wall. Tony threw him to the ground fiercely, and then he sprayed air from his hands and feet, slowly rose into the air, and said to the villagers, "Leave it to you." After Tony left, the villagers all set their eyes on him, and then surrounded him. Tony left the village, and flew quickly to another village. Through the scanning of the armor, Tony's panel soon showed an abnormal reminder. After zooming in, it turned out to be a Jericho missile. Tony had just finished the analysis, and the next moment he was hit by a shell. Tony, who was hit, fell to the ground in a rotation, stirring up a large amount of smoke and dust. In the pit he fell out of, Tony slowly climbed up, and at this time there were some signs of damage on his armor. He looked at the tank not far away, and the next second a shell was fired at him, and Tony dodged it with a sideways movement. Then he stretched out his hand to the tank, and saw a macro missile stretched out from his arm, and he aimed and fired it and hit it. Then Tony turned around, and left without looking back, and the next second the tank immediately turned into a ball of fire with a boom. Cool. This is so cool. Tony Stark. Man. I really want to have his set. Garfield Spider cheered and said, I can't help you with this. Brother. This is a bit difficult. The second generation Harry spread his hands after hearing what Toby Spider said. Oh, I'm kidding. Garfield Spider didn't care when he heard it and waved his hand and smiled. Yeah, I know. I'll let the company's people study it. Although Garfield Spider said he said it jokingly, but Harry knew what he was thinking and was going to try to satisfy his wish. Oh, that's unnecessary. Harry. Hearing Harry's words, Garfield Spider hurriedly stopped him. He knew that Osborn Industries was in a bad situation now, so he should not cause trouble for him. Isn't this turn handsome? Tony looked at Rhodes with a boastful expression. Rhodes rolled his eyes and didn't want to pay attention to him. Banner couldn't help but smile. Tony walked slowly in the face of gunfire and bullets. A large number of terrorists fired at him crazily with guns. The dense bullets sparked a lot of sparks on Tony. So he flew directly into the air. Unexpectedly, he did not lock on the enemy, but locked on the Jericho missile. Then Tony detonated it with a charged palm cannon, and the flames of the explosion engulfed all the terrorists. Lazar, who was sitting in a green pickup truck, stopped the car looking at the smoke in the distance. Tony soared into the air in the flames and flew away. At this time, soldiers at Edwards Air Force Base in California discovered a UFO on the radar. What is that? Can we enter there? An officer asked in confusion. No. They use human shields. We can't get approval. The soldier replied immediately. Connect me to the Ministry of Defense. This matter must be dealt with immediately. A supervisor in the back immediately ordered. Due to the sudden appearance of the UFO, the entire base suddenly became busy, and they quickly confirmed that it was not their own air force. The supervisor asked, is the CIA online? CIA headquarters is online. They asked if it was our plane. Said the officer who was answering the phone. No, it's definitely not ours, sir. It's not the Navy's. It's not the Marines. The soldiers answered one after another. What I want is the answer. Do you have a target image? Go and ask Lieutenant Colonel Rod from the Weapon Development Department. Immediately. Seeing that there was no clue, the supervisor immediately ordered his subordinates. Chapter 222. Oh, shit. I'm in trouble now. Rod looked at Tony and said resentfully. He still remembered how he explained to the news media at that time. Now, he had a hunch that the truth about the crash of the F-22 was going to be exposed. Those reporters would definitely come to him. Hey, I've already paid for that F-22. Tony knew what Rod was thinking as soon as he saw Rod's eyes. He was also helpless. At that time, he had not planned to reveal his identity. That's why he asked Rod to help him conceal the past. He didn't expect that after so long, it was exposed by the sky curtain. It's not that problem, Tony. Rod hesitated, not knowing what to say. At that time, the accident caused some people in the Air Force Base to be ridiculed for a long time. Fortunately, Tony was both a super rich man and had the halo of a savior, so it was not a big problem. But he might be unlucky. People looking at the sky curtain guessed that it was Tony Stark, and sure enough, what happened next was as they expected. The UFO found at the Air Force Base was Tony wearing Mark II, flying at high speed. Rod walked to the command room. The supervisor took off his glasses when he saw Rod coming in and looked at him and said, we have verified the identity. We have also searched all known databases, but found nothing. Hearing this, Rod asked the sergeant, are there any high altitude reconnaissance means in the local area? There are airborne warning systems and global hawk drones. The sergeant immediately replied to Rod. Did this thing come out of thin air? Why is there no radar display? Rod looked at everyone dissatisfied. A soldier immediately explained to him, its radar cross-section is extremely small, sir. Hearing this, Rod immediately said, "Is it a stealth aircraft?" "No, sir. Based on the size, we think it may be a drone." Another soldier immediately denied Rod's idea. "Lieutenant Colonel, what should we do?" The supervisor looked solemn. This kind of thing was not a good thing for him. Rod thought for a moment and decided to ask Tony. "I'll make a call." Tony, who was flying in the air, received a call from Rod. "Hello, Tony. This is Rod. Sorry, who is this?" The wind was too strong and Tony couldn't hear clearly. "I said I'm Rod." Rod repeated again. "Please speak louder." Tony still couldn't hear clearly. Rod raised his voice in confusion. "Why is there so much noise?" "Oh, yeah. I'm driving a convertible." Tony immediately thought of an excuse to get away with it. "Okay, I want to ask you for a favor." Rod didn't suspect anything and directly stated his purpose. "I didn't expect you to ask me for help." Tony was very surprised. "Yeah. Speaking of unexpected, one of our arsenals exploded not far from where you were detained." Although there was no direct connection, Rod still instinctively thought of Tony because with his personality, he could do such a thing. "That's a hot spot. It seems that someone is helping you consume munitions." Tony teased Rod. "Why do you seem to be out of breath?" "Tony." Rod felt that Tony was very strange today. "No, I'm jogging in the canyon." Tony immediately thought of another lame lie to try to cover it up. "You just said you were driving." Rod felt something was wrong. "I was driving to the canyon just now, and now I'm jogging in the canyon." Tony made up a lie, and he needed another lie to make it whole. "Are you sure you don't have any new technology to tell me?" Rod said while looking at the screen. "No." Tony denied it without hesitation. He didn't want to be known. "Sir, target found." Just as the two were talking, Tony's figure had already been spotted in the command room. "God whip. Prepare to intercept." The supervisor immediately gave the order. "That's good. We found an unidentified flying object and are planning to shoot it down." As soon as Rod finished speaking, Tony on the other end of the phone found that there were two F-22s following him. "I should get off the highway." Tony hung up the phone in a hurry and immediately turned a corner. The two F-22s chased closely and God whip number 1 directly locked Tony during the chase. Rod immediately asked, "God whip number 1, what is that?" "I don't know too much." "Have you contacted it?" the supervisor asked the pilot. The other party did not respond. "Sir." After hearing the pilot's reply, the supervisor said directly, "You can attack." Tony, who was still flying, did not know that he was on the kill list of the Air Force Base. He was still trying to get rid of them. "Start." Tony shouted, and the thrusters immediately opened up, instantly breaking through the supersonic speed, and began to move away from the F-22 at a very fast speed. "The target is flying at supersonic speed." I locked it. Whip number 1 immediately launched an attack on Tony. I saw an air-to-air missile shot out from the belly of the aircraft, catching up with it at a faster speed than Tony. Jarvis immediately detected it. "There is a Sidewinder missile." Flare. Following Tony's order, a large number of heat interference sources popped out from the side of the armor, and the Sidewinder missile was immediately interfered and exploded directly. The shock wave of the explosion made Tony fall downwards involuntarily. The pilot behind him saw this and immediately reported, "Wait a minute, the target is using jammers." Then he avoided the explosion flame area and continued to chase Tony. Tony rolled in the air and did free fall. It took a lot of effort to restart the thrusters that were affected by the aftermath of the explosion. He immediately accelerated and continued to flee. One of the F-22s directly locked Tony and started to shoot with the onboard machine gun. Tony quickly dodged sideways, but unfortunately, he was hit by several rounds. Tony was quick-witted and pushed his hands forward directly, braking in the air. "Wait, look there." The two F-22s immediately avoided the situation. When they turned around, Tony had disappeared without a trace. The target suddenly disappeared from the radar. "Sir." The satellite image lost the target. The soldiers immediately began to report the situation. "It can't be a drone," a pilot said with certainty. "What is that?" the supervisor asked. "I can't see it." Pilot number 1 kept looking around, but he couldn't find any trace of Tony. Whippo number 2 pilot said, "Whatever it is, it's gone." Chapter 223. Where did he go? There's no place to hide in the air. Toby Spider thought carefully, but didn't see where Tony was hiding. Maybe he fell below the clouds? Gwen guessed. No. Then he would still be scanned by the radar. The first generation Carners denied Gwen's idea. Then he looked at Otto on the side and asked, "Do you have any ideas?" Otto? No. Peter, you are wrong. There are places to hide in the air. Haven't you thought that he might be close to the fighter? Otto smiled slightly. Indeed, the pilot's field of view on the fighter is very limited. If he hides in the belly of the plane or the back and top of the plane, the pilot really can't see him. Toby Spider's eyes lit up, and he immediately understood what Otto meant. Good, Peter. But I'd prefer that he hides in the belly of the plane, because that can also explain why he not only disappeared from the radar, but also didn't find him even in satellite images. Otto looked at Toby Spider with satisfaction. This is really a smart child, but it's not enough, although he has been much more diligent. Yeah, that's true. I wonder if Harry's skateboard can be as fast as Tony Stark's. Toby Spider nodded, and then turned the topic to Harry's Green Goblin skateboard. The first generation Carners was very interested, and began to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of Harry's skateboard and Tony's Mark III armor with Otto, and imagined how to improve them. After checking continuously without results, the pilot of Whip 2 said, "I think the target has been cleared, sir." Rod subconsciously felt that it would not be so easy to eliminate the target. At this time, his mobile phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and found that it was Tony's call. Rod hesitated for 2 seconds and answered the call. "Hello. Hi, Rod. It's me." Tony's voice came. Rod returned Tony's words to him. "Who are you?" "I'm sorry. It's me. You asked. You want to know about me." Facing the pursuit of 2 F-22s, Tony had to tell him the truth. Seeing Tony admit it, Rod suppressed his anger and said, "No. Listen, this is not a game. You can't send civilian equipment into our combat zone. Do you understand?" Tony yelled at him, "This is not equipment. I'm in it. This is a battle suit. That is me." Hearing this, Rod looked at the screen in disbelief. The supervisor had been observing Rod and asked, "Rod, what's going on?" Rod turned his head and looked at him, not knowing how to explain this. At the same time, the command room felt that the target had been cleared, so it ordered, "Mark the direction and return to base." So Whip 2 immediately turned sideways to prepare for a turn. Just as he turned sideways, the pilot of Whip 1 suddenly saw a figure clinging to the belly of the plane. He opened his eyes wide to make sure he was not dazzled and immediately shouted, "There seems to be a person under you. Get rid of him. Roll. Roll." God Whip 2 immediately did as he was told and began to maneuver and roll in the air. Tony soon lost his grip on the fighter and was thrown out. Behind him was God Whip 1. Due to its high speed, the pilot of God Whip 1 didn't even have time to react, and the left wing was smashed to pieces. The whole plane immediately began to smoke and fell down. I was it. God Whip 1 crashed. Everyone in the command room watched this scene in horror. Rod also opened his eyes wide, thinking that this was not good. The pilot of God Whip 1 immediately pulled the lever to eject. The next second, after he successfully ejected, the F-22 exploded again. It was the ammunition that exploded. This supersonic fighter worth $150 million fell from the sky with a lot of black smoke and debris. Seeing that number 1 had completely crashed, the supervisor immediately asked, "God Whip number 2. Did you see the parachute?" "No, I didn't see the parachute." The pilot was horrified to find that his parachute could not be opened. Everyone in the command room could hear his terrified gasps. "My parachute is stuck." Unable to open the parachute, the pilot and his seat kept spinning and falling, and everyone looked at the screen worriedly. Just when the pilot was desperate, a long tail flame appeared above his head, and Tony dived down at high speed, constantly approaching him. God Whip number 2 easily saw the tail flame. "Sir, I found the target flying again." God Whip 2. "Lock it immediately. Shoot it down, if you have a chance." An F-22 crashed. What a big accident. The supervisor must not let it go easily, otherwise he will be in big trouble. God Whip 2 immediately chased Tony, after receiving the order. Rhodes thought that Tony must not die here, but he could not clearly tell the supervisor the identity of the other party, so he could only hint, "We don't even know who the other party is. Order the Raptor to return." That guy actually shot down an F-22 fighter in the no-fly zone. Of course, the supervisor couldn't let Tony go just like that, otherwise he would be court-martialed. After rejecting Rhodes' opinion, he then ordered God Whip 2. Get close to it and try to shoot it down. Tony, who was diving at high speed, also received bad news from Jarvis. "Sir, you are locked again. Please do evasive maneuvers immediately." Continue. Tony made up his mind to save the pilot first and shouted directly. He soon caught up with the falling pilot, grabbed his chair, punched through the parachute control lever, and the parachute immediately popped out open. "Open." The pilot shouted, and everyone in the command room cheered when they heard it, and the supervisor was relieved. Then Tony immediately flew at supersonic speed in the air and got rid of the pursuit of Whip to cool. Tony Stark. He went to save people first, even though he knew he was locked. Garfield Spider looked admiring. He liked this kind of person, just like himself. Yes, he really has that kind of responsibility. To be honest, I began to believe that he can really sacrifice himself for others. Gwen sighed. Tony's before and after is very different. He has gradually changed from a playboy to the man who is willing to save people, even if he is locked up. Ethan has made great contributions. Yeah. Ethan's death has as much impact on Tony Stark as I killed Uncle Ben in the sky. Maybe we are all the same. Only after experiencing such pain can we know how to realize our own value. Garfield thought that he realized his responsibility after Uncle Ben's death, and realized from George's accusation that he could not be driven by hatred. This is how Spider-Man is now. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224. Rod called Tony. "Tony, are you still there? Hey. Thank you." Hearing Tony's voice, Rod breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh my god. You lunatic. You owe me a plane, you know that?" Tony couldn't help laughing. "Yeah. Actually it was the plane that hit me. Now do you want to know what I'm doing?" "No. No. No. The less I know, the better. But how can I explain it to the media?" Hearing this, Rod immediately shook his head like a rattle. "Just say it was a training accident. Don't you always say that?" Tony directly helped Rod think of an excuse. "It's not that simple." The last second Rod was still saying it was not that simple, and the next second he had appeared at the press conference. An F-22 Raptor fighter crashed during a routine flight training yesterday. Fortunately, our pilot is safe and sound. As for the unexpected incident in the Gumila area, it is not clear who did it and what the motive is. But I can guarantee, the government has absolutely nothing to do with it. Abadia squinted his eyes in his pajamas and watched Rod's speech. I don't know what he was thinking. He has received the news that the 10 Commandments gang was it. Ha ha ha. Didn't you say that things are not that simple? Isn't this very simple? Ha 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 ha. Rod's performance made Otto laugh directly. The first generation Kanas laughed. Yeah. It's really simple. Whatever he says, the media must believe it. Humph. Isn't this his usual style? Rod covered his face helplessly, feeling ashamed to see people. He made up a lie to conceal the situation, and it was exposed. Now he is going to suffer. Tony laughed and pulled him, telling him not to worry so much, because he was the one who caused the trouble. He called Egghead directly in front of Rhodes, and asked him to help him solve the problem. Nick Fury was helpless, but he could only help Tony solve the problem, because Tony promised him that he would donate a sum of money to S.H.I.E.L.D. after the problem was solved. There was no way Tony gave too much. In the end, this matter did not cause too much disturbance. Most people watched it as a joke. At the same time, the military immediately explained to the public that Tony had paid for the plane. Because this matter had been a long time ago, if they were to be held accountable, most people at that time would be unlucky, so in the end it was left unresolved. Pepper came to the basement of the villa and heard Tony's voice. Before she saw him, she saw Tony trying to take off the Mark III with her AA. Can you be gentle? This is my first time. I remember I designed a way to take it off, so it should be possible. Tony kept trying to take off the Mark III. Sir, please don't move, Jarvis added. Pepper walked in and asked, what's going on? Tony only reacted at this time. He looked at Pepper for a while and said, I admit my bad luck. Anyway, it's not the first time you caught me. Pepper stared at the marks on the Mark III and asked, are those bullet holes? The scene changed, and they came to a military camp. Lazar was waiting with several men, and a team of vehicles came in front of him. Abadia got out of the car, and looked around as he walked. Lazar looked at him calmly, welcome. Then he pointed to the scar on his face. This is thanks to Tony Stark. Hearing this, Abadia grinned and said, if you had killed Tony Stark earlier, you wouldn't have lost face. That would be too easy for you. Lazar looked at Abadia unkindly. Let me see that thing. Abadia didn't want to talk nonsense with Lazar anymore, so he got straight to the point. Come. Let your bodyguards wait outside. Lazar turned and walked in. Abadia waved his hand back to signal the bodyguards to wait, and followed. After entering the tent, Abadia saw Mark I at first sight. Lazar said over him, his escape brought unexpected results. Abadia folded his arms and looked at the wreckage of Mark I and suddenly realized, so he used this to escape. This is just a primitive version. Stark has perfected the design. This thing of his is the ultimate weapon. If I had a dozen of them, I would be able to rule Asia. Lazar looked at Abadia and tempted him. You can also own Stark's kingdom. We have a common enemy. If you continue to cooperate, the design drawings of this thing will be given to you. Abadia looked at the round gap on Mark I's chest, put his finger in it and touched it, and he immediately thought of Tony's miniature arc reactor. In return, I hope you can give me an Iron Man army. Lazar sat aside and poured Abadia a cup of tea and wanted to give it to him. Abadia walked to his side with a smile, put his hand on his shoulder, and took a miniature machine in his hand and started it up. A subsonic wave sounded, and a large number of blue blood vessels under the skin of the wound on Lazar's face were immediately exposed. This is the only gift you have received. Abadia's ears lit up with blue light at some point. It turned out to be a special headset designed to resist this kind of sound waves. He took off the headset, touched the head of Raza who was unable to move, and left the tent directly. 1. Technology. Technology will always be the fatal weakness of you people. Don't worry. It will be fine in 15 minutes. Worry about the trouble later. When he came outside, he saw that Abadia's men had subdued all the members of the 10 Commandments gang, and they were forced to kneel on the ground with their heads in their hands. Abadia said without turning his head, pack the armor and other things. Okay. Clean up the battlefield. As soon as he finished speaking, fierce gunfire came from behind him. Abadia returned to the car and ordered with his mobile phone, set up Zone 16 under the arc reactor project. All information is kept confidential. Find the best engineer and make a prototype for me immediately. Chapter 225. He is indeed the mastermind behind the scenes. Although there have been speculations about this matter on the internet for a long time, when Abadia appeared in Gumira, those who had not guessed his true identity also understood it one after another. Countless people cursed him, especially the main universe of MCU. If Abadia had not died without even ashes left, he would have been dug up. After watching the tragic situation in Gumira, many interested people began to search for the war situation in the Middle East, and things began to ferment gradually. Countless people in the world began to sympathize with these refugees, and for a time, those war-torn areas were forced to stop the gunfire. Because several major countries have intervened in these wars, under diplomatic pressure, those armed regimes had to temporarily give in, so the world gained peace for a short time. Pepper came to the basement. Tony was studying the updated Mark IV, and when he saw her come in, he asked, "Are you free? Can you help me? I need you to go to my office. Hack into my main computer. Get all the recent shipping lists. Take this. Use it to get in." Tony handed her a USB flash drive. It may be in the administrative folder. If not, it is in the hidden disk. Just find the one with the smallest number. Pepper was a little surprised why Tony wanted to hack into her main computer, but she was smart and didn't ask why, but said directly, "If I get the data, what do you plan to do with it?" As always, they have been making deals behind the scenes. I want to stop them. I want to find my weapons and destroy them. Tony continued to design the armor while answering Pepper's questions. Pepper looked at Tony seriously. She felt that Tony was just fooling around, and doing so would bring him great risks. "Tony, you know I'm willing to do anything for you. But, if you keep messing around like this, I can't help you." Tony turned his head and looked at Pepper solemnly. "I'll always be like this. I won't attend the opening ceremony. I won't do charity. I won't sign any more documents. This is my only mission. That's all. Is that so? Then I quit." Pepper nodded, threw the USB drive on the table, turned around and wanted to walk out. "For so many years you've been helping me earn the ill-gotten gains brought by destruction. Now I want to atone for my sins, but you're going to quit?" Tony looked at Pepper a little disappointed. Hearing this, Pepper turned around and said to Tony, "What you are doing is tantamount to suicide. Tony, I will not participate in it." Tony sat back in his chair. "I should have committed suicide. Unless I have a reason to live. I'm not crazy. Pepper, I just finally understand what I should do. I firmly believe that there is no choice for me." Looking at Tony's expression, Pepper sighed deeply, walked to the table, and picked up the USB drive. "I have no choice but you." After saying that, she turned and left. "Pepper is so nice. Seeing her is like seeing you, Gwen." Garfield Spider looked at Pepper, who was willing to take risks for Tony, and thought of Gwen in the sky, who had taken risks for herself many times. The second generation Gwen rolled up her hair and smiled. "Because it's worth it. You are worth my risk. For you, I will do anything." "Yeah, me too." Garfield Spider held her little hand and pressed it against her forehead. Tony Stark, he has begun to wake up and understand his responsibilities. Ethan's last words before his death spurred him forward. The first generation of Uncle Ben sighed at Tony's transformation. There is no doubt that Tony knew that his actions would affect many people's cakes, but he still wanted to do it. Yeah. He gradually changed from an arms dealer to the future savior Iron Man. Aunt May nodded in agreement. In Stark Building, Pepper took the elevator to Tony's office. There was no one in it at this time. Pepper turned on the computer and inserted the USB drive. The security system was immediately cracked by the virus in the USB drive. She quickly found the hidden drive and then found the 16th district file hidden by Abadia. "What are you doing, Abadia?" Pepper clicked on the next file and was surprised to find that it was a video sent to Abadia by the 10 Commandments after Tony was kidnapped. Pepper discovered that Abadia Stain was the mastermind behind Tony's kidnapping and couldn't help but exclaimed "OMG." She immediately copied the files, and at this moment, Abadia's voice sounded, startling her. "So, for this matter, how should we deal with this matter?" Abadia stood at the door and said meaningfully to Pepper. He walked to the table with a glass of wine and filled his own. "I know. What are you going through, Pepper?" Pepper looked at him nervously and took a look at the files being copied while he was pouring the wine. Abadia picked up a bottle of wine and smelled it. "Tony, he always gets good things, doesn't he?" Pepper forced a smile, and then Abadia continued to lower his head to pour the wine. Pepper took the opportunity to cover the USB drive with a newspaper. Abadia walked over with a glass of wine, and Pepper hid the interface calmly. When he walked over, he could only see the screensaver wallpaper. He glanced at the scrolling screensaver, walked silently to the other side of Pepper, and sat on the table. "How happy I was when he just came back. It was like seeing the light in the darkness. Now I understand. Well, Tony never really came back. Half of him stayed in that cave. He broke my heart." Pepper swallowed unconsciously as she looked at Abadia. Now she felt that he was very scary. Hearing this, she pretended to be calm and smiled and said, "Well, he is a man with multiple personalities. He has been through a lot, and he will be fine." Abadia took a sip of wine and smacked his lips. "You are a rare good woman. Tony doesn't know how lucky he is." Hearing his praise for herself, Pepper lowered her head embarrassedly. "Thank you. Thank you." Then she stood up and said, "I think I should go back." When she reached out for the newspaper, she took the opportunity to clamp the USB drive in her palm and took it away just when she thought everything was going well and she could leave immediately. Abadia looked out the window and suddenly asked, "Is that today's newspaper, Pepper?" End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.